On this episode of the DTVC podcast, Mitch from the Video Vacuum is back for his yearly Christmas episode, and we're going to be looking at Santa Claus, starring Debbie Rochon. Also, it's our yearly conversation about the film Elves with Dan Haggerty. So I know people are anticipating that. It's always a fun conversation to discuss that movie. Now, one thing I want to mention, I mentioned in the episode about a movie that I reviewed recently that Debbie Rochon was in called Flesh of the Unforgiven. I believe I called it Flesh of the Unfaithful. And that's not the name of it. It's Flesh of the Unforgiven. But I definitely check it out. I think at one point I say it's kind of crazy and all over the place, and like her performance, because it's a really kind of her performance really sells the movie. I don't know that it's crazy and all over the place is exactly the term I wanted. It's more like there's a lot to unpack with what's going on in that movie. And so yeah, I think if she doesn't give the performance that she does, where she's really selling it, you may stray when you're watching. But I think if you're a fan of her work, you should definitely check that movie out as well. But anyway, in just a bit, we'll be talking about Santa Claus and Elves. And then next week, Freddie Young from Full Moon Reviews is back for another Christmas episode. We had him on last year for a Christmas episode as well. This time we're going to be talking about the new Silent Night, Deadly Night that just came out in the theaters recently. And then we'll be talking about Santa's Sleigh, kind of a horror action comedy starring Bill Goldberg and also Robert Culp. So yeah, stay tuned for that. Next week, we'll be talking about that. And then we're closing out the year with John Cross from After Movie Diner and PM Entertainment Podcast. We're going to be looking at two erotic thrillers with C. Thomas Howell and Joan Severance. We'll be looking at Deadly Desire, I believe is the name of it, and Payback. Payback, I definitely know, but those other ones like Deadly Desire, it could be Dangerous Desire, illicit. They use those terms kind of interchangeably, so it's always hard to remember. But I think it's Deadly Desire, but maybe it could be Dangerous Desire too. It's also got Malcolm McDowell in it. So, but anyway, really fun conversation as always with John. So stay tuned for that. When we recorded that episode, we weren't expecting it to be the New Year's episode, but some other episodes have kind of come in between that I've put up, including these two Christmas ones. So it worked out that it's the New Year's one, and in a way, it's kind of fitting because on his After Movie Diner podcast, he used to always do this really great New Year's episode. If you go back in the archives, some of those they're really fun. I mean, a lot of times they were like 4-hour extravaganzas. You'd have like Mo Porn on, or Dr. Action Kick-Ass. They'd all be on there, yeah, really really fun conversations there. So, but anyway, stay tuned for that. It'll be the end of the year. We'll be closing out the year with John Cross from After Movie Diner, a PM Entertainment Podcast, talking about a couple erotic thrillers with C. Thomas Howell and Joan Severance. Now, in terms of DTVC Extra, I think I'm still looking to maybe do an episode on the ballerina, so keep an eye out for that. It would have come this past weekend, but we posted something on the YouTube. Well, we tried to put something on the YouTube channel. More on that in a second. But yeah, so keep an eye out. Hopefully, I'll have that ballerina episode end of this week. So things are starting to wind down a bit with work, and so it's not so much with my work that I have more time for these kinds of things. It's more I have more energy. Like if my job isn't so crazy, I don't feel like just like sort of crawling up in bed and watching, out of market hockey games and falling asleep. You know what I mean? Like if the day's not so crazy, I'll be like, okay, I've got the energy to get on the computer and record an episode. So we'll see. Probably end of the week, I'll try to get something like that in. Now, back to the YouTube channel. I tried to post the opening action sequence in Hard Justice, and it was blocked for copyright. A movie that is not really, as far as I can tell, on anything. Maybe old VHS, and that's it. It's a hard movie to find, but for some reason, despite the fact that you can't find it anywhere, it has a copyright block on it. And so the whole thing was blocked. It wasn't like, my other ones, it's like it'll be a copyright warning, but it will still let me have the video up. This case, it was just completely blocked. The same thing happened with King of the Kickboxers. And just like with King of the Kickboxers, I posted it directly on Facebook, directly on Instagram. I tried to link the Facebook post on Blue Sky, and I don't think that came out so well. I don't think that worked well. I don't think Blue Sky likes posting Facebook links. So I might figure out another way to do that in the future. But it is, in its entirety, it's about a 5-minute video. In its entirety, it's on our Facebook page, it's on our Instagram page, so you can check those out. You can check that video out if you want to see it there. But it was a really fun one to make, for sure, and people have responded well to it. So, unfortunately, it's not on the YouTube channel, so we can't put it there, but it's everywhere else. So definitely, if you want to check that out, you definitely go check that one out. And I don't know what the future of the YouTube channel is going to be beyond the podcast now, because this is a second movie that I went through all the trouble to make to get completely blocked. So I don't know if I'm going to keep trying and potentially getting more blocked. It seems like the Seagal movies do okay, so maybe we'll just do another Seagal one here in the near future. But yeah, keep an eye out for that. Yeah, and then in terms of the blog, we did American Dragons, aka Double Edge, this past weekend. It was our post in honor of Cary Tagawa, who left us just a couple weeks ago. Really, really sad news there to lose him. I mean, one of the best villains, movie villains ever. So many great roles, right? I mean, obviously, Showdown in Little Tokyo and Bridge of Dragons played a really big part in us, having this site, this podcast, all of that. Two of the best video game movie villains ever, right? When you think of Mortal Kombat and Tekken. Now with Mortal Kombat, I just recorded the January episode with Ty, and our Spotlight on a Fight is going to be the Mortal Kombat end fight in honor of Tagawa. So keep it out for that next year as well, or next month, I guess. But anyway, in January, that we'll be covering that fight for our Spotlight on a Fight. But yeah, I mean, what an amazing legend he was. And so it was good to do a post in honor of him. We gave him 2 paragraphs in that one. Also talking about Michael Biehn, New York City, those kinds of things. So you can check that review out. It is on the site. In terms of the next one, I'm thinking about doing Special Forces, Isaac Florentine movie with Marshall Teague in it. So interesting story around that one. I was looking to do more exploding helicopter movies because my number of movies watched with exploding helicopters was really bad. And so I was looking at Isaac Florentine ones. For some reason, I had the names mixed up between Special Forces and U.S. SEALs 2. And so U.S. SEALs 2 doesn't have an exploding helicopter in it, but I thought that was the one I needed to see. But no, it was Special Forces that I needed to see, and that does have an exploding helicopter. So we'll probably get that one in there. When we get that one watched and reviewed, I think we'll only have 3 more Isaac Florentine movies left to do. It'll be High Voltage, Hounds of War, and Desert Kickboxer. I think those are the only 3 movies we'll have left to do from Isaac Florentine. So yeah, we're getting close on his directorial work there. So keep an eye out for that for this coming weekend. And then also we're getting close to Christmas. So for my Christmas documentary movie this year, we're going to be doing a documentary on erotic thrillers called We Kill for Love. So definitely check that one out. Not to be confused with We Fight for Love, the end song in Commando, done by Power Station. But We Kill for Love. So that'll be our Christmas documentary post. We're going to try to keep that tradition going of doing a documentary on for Christmas for the blog. I think that's everything. We're already close to 8 minutes, so it should be everything. Except, right, you're thinking to yourself, oh man, we almost got out of there without him doing a talk about one of his books. No, we're going to get that one in here. Mark and Sales, my newest book. The link is in the podcast description. Amazon, Kindle Unlimited, paperback. Go pick it up. It's one of the best things. It's your good deed for Christmas for this year, right? Everybody's got to have their good holiday deed. Instead of putting money in that box that goes to like some fundamentalist Christian proselytizing group that's outside ringing the bell in the Santa costume, give me the money. I'll do better things with it. I'll do some things for this site and stuff like that. And I'm not going to proselytize with you. So I think that's a good way for you to spend your money. Go pick up Mark and Sales. Do it, as Wilford Brimley used to say, it's the right thing to do. So Mark and Sales, links in the podcast description. Hop on over to Amazon, pick up a copy. And if you're wondering, if you get the Kindle version, I get the same amount of money as I would if you got the paperback. So you don't have to spend as much. I think it's $5 on Kindle. It's a great way to spend $5 this holiday season. Do it for me, do it for the kids, even though we don't have any kids, but my cats would appreciate it. I can get them some cat toys with that money. But anyway, why don't we, while I'm rambling here, why don't we call this good? We'll have John from Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures come in, play our theme song, and then when we come back, Mitch and I are going to be talking about Santa Claus and elves. Hey everyone, welcome back to the DTVC podcast. As always, this is Matt here, and I am joined once again for his yearly Christmas episode that we've been doing here. Mitch from the Video Vacuum. Welcome back, Mitch.
Hey Matt, how you doing?
Good, good. Yeah, so I went back through the episodes to see. So the first time we did this was in 2020 when we did Santa's Summer House, and then 2021 I wasn't doing a lot of podcasts then, so it was 2022 was the next time, and it was actually I think it was the Steven Seagal True Justice movie that you were on for. It just happened to be like end of November, and I was like, why don't we talk about Elves as well?
Yeah, and I'm always down to talk about elves. So I mean, that just fit the bill perfectly.
Exactly. And then the next year in 2023, there was Pups Alone, the Dolph movie. And it was like, okay, well, this is perfect one for us to do around Christmas time. And so then it just worked out that, okay, it's been 3 out of the last 4 years we've done a Christmas episode where you've been able to talk about elves for the second half. So last year we did Silent Night, Deadly Night, and figured, why don't we do another one this year? We'll do Santa Claus.
Yeah, keep the Killer Santa theme going, and got to represent the holiday horror this time of year.
Exactly, exactly. And this one is an interesting one, Santa Claus. Now, one thing I'll quickly mention before we get into it too much is actually Debbie Rochon. So when you and I discussed what episode we were going to do the last time you were on, when we were recording for the Dolph episode for Missionary Man, we talked about what movie to do, and we're like, oh, Santa Claus, because I was saying I wanted to get more Debbie Rochon on the site and the podcast and all that stuff because she was someone I watched as growing up, in the '90s in horror movies. But in the meantime, I got a screener request from a producer and publicist Joe Williamson for a movie that she was in. And I didn't realize she was in it. I didn't even know that I don't even know if he may have mentioned it and I missed it in the Facebook message. So I'm watching it and I thought she did a really great job in it. So I mentioned it in the post. And Cam Sully on the Instagram post, he mentioned her in the comments of the post. And she was like, she liked the post. She followed me on Instagram. She liked my recent post on Ice, the Tracy Lords movie that I know you covered, and the guys that come up and Bulletproof all covered. So I finally joined the party on that movie. But she liked it. So like, okay, so now between those times, like I wasn't like we picked this movie because she's following me now. It's like no, it just sort of happened in the meantime. But I imagine she'll probably end up if you're listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode for sure.
Yeah, I actually met Debbie at a horror convention, maybe 2003, 2004, and we talked a lot about Playmate of the Apes because I think that was one of her more recent ones at that time, and she kind of did like the ape dance for me, and it was a lot of fun. She had a lot of great stories, and she's just like every bit as cool as you would think she is in person.
Yeah, she definitely seems like it for sure. She's one of those ones that when I started my site, I figured I'd be doing a ton of Debbie Rochon movies, and then when the low budget action ones were the ones that were getting the engagement, I shifted away from horror more. And I know, like for your site, like I mean, like this movie we're talking about today, Santa Claus. I think it was one of your early reviews, like in '07, I think initially. Then you did the 4K as well.
Yeah, the it was one of those where the timing was just right. I think I was just looking for reviews, and I think I had just picked it up at a flea market or uh, and it was right there for the taking. And it's one of those I've come back to every few years, because the holiday horror theme, and it never disappoints, and it's just one of the more I don't know if unsung is the right word, but it's definitely one of like that. It definitely belongs in that second tier of classic holiday slasher films.
Yeah, I totally agree because it's not like a what do I say, like a Silent Night, Deadly Night, kind of, sort of like that level of classic. But it definitely fits in this certain level of like that '90s low budget horror. I mean, it came out in '96, but it feels like it could be a few years earlier potentially. And it has that look and feel of that kind of movie with all the characters and everything involved. And yeah, it hits a certain sweet spot.
Yeah, and watching it again, and looking at the Blu-ray, it's one of the things that really brings it into focus because it's a really good transfer. Is that it has this hazy kind of look to it that is reminiscent of Elves. Like I don't know if they filmed it on film and then edited on video, but it has like that kind of hazy look that you get with these low budget films of that era, and like you said, it definitely feels a little earlier than the '96 release date, but that's a plus in my book.
Yeah, no, totally for sure. And I think too, like, because it's filmed in Pittsburgh and in like a neighboring suburb of Pittsburgh called Clairton, which I've never heard of, but looking at it online, I had to go on Google Maps. I was curious about it. It looks like it's like kind of like a kind of out of the way suburb, like it's not connected by like a train or something like that. So but it looks like it's maybe a little more affluent, I guess, with especially a lot of the split level houses that we see in there. But I think that time of year with like Pittsburgh, with it being so cold and kind of dreary, it just sort of adds a feel to it, I think.
Yeah, and like the like town little town square and stuff, it's not quite Norman Rockwell, but it's like it gives you that kind of small town middle America feeling. That's kind of important when you're doing one of these low budget holiday horror movies.
Yeah, and then you've got Debbie Rochon's part, where she's playing a woman who originally went to school for zoology, but is now doing sexy, racy photos with John Russo, who is the director. And at the time, Russo was doing, what was it, like Scream Queens, like pictorials, or like kind of racy videos, I guess, or like videos of like with models, kind of in various levels of undress, I guess.
Well, at the time, Scream Queen magazine was like a real magazine, and it was maybe like a step below, like maybe Femme Fatale or something like that. But it definitely gave you like that old timey cheesecake kind of uh, aesthetic, but with like '80s and '90s horror B movie, Scream Queens, and that kind of thing. So it was a good magazine for a while, and like excuse me, unfortunately, all good things like have to come to an end. But like when you see this, like 25, 30 years later, it definitely makes you kind of wistful for like the time where you could walk into like a Barnes and Noble and just like pull a magazine like that off the rack.
Right, because yeah, the one thing I notice about this movie, kind of the magazine, the shoots, all of it, the tone of the film as well. It's, I don't know if PC is the right term, but it's like when you see Lloyd Kaufman on Twitter or something like that, he's saying things that like in 2025 you probably shouldn't be saying, but in the 90s that sense of humor worked. There was a kind of an overall vibe in the 90s that, yes, maybe some aspects of it maybe weren't good, but overall, I think there was a feel of that. And I think one of the interesting things with like a magazine like Scream Queens or something like that is that, yeah, it's like today we're more open to sex work, but on the other hand, I think there's a sense of like, I don't know how to explain, like you can't do it quite the same way you would have done it back then.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think that it wasn't quite that exploitative. It was kind of done in the same kind of vein as a lot of the films that they were starring in. So I think, yeah, it's very of the time, and maybe you couldn't get away with it today unless there was like some, you put a qualifier in there, like a tribute to the Grindhouse or whatever. But I think there, from what I remember reading those magazines, like they would have like people like I think Monique Gabrielle and uh, Tiffany Shepis, I think, were on there. Some of the covers. I think uh, that magazine, and at that time, Playboy is very big too. So it's like if you wanted that B movie slice of that kind of like I said, it was more cheesecake than pornographic than anything really.
Yeah, and, we talked about this when we did Animal Instincts. How when you were a certain age back in the '90s, if you were too young to get what was behind the beaded curtain, these movies could fill in for that. That there was a, like for example, it's in this movie we're talking about here, Santa Claus. There are a lot of women that are topless and kind of dancing around in g-strings and stuff like that. It's like it's not quite to the same level as the softcore porn, erotic thrillers that you could get on, again, in kind of the main aisles of the video store, but it still sort of filled a bit of that purpose for younger people.
Yeah, and I think too, what's interesting when you watch it now, like those kind of the scenes where the girls are undressing, and it's all part for a home video, the Scream Queens Christmas, which actually is actually on the Blu-ray as a
Oh,
bonus
nice.
feature, which is really cool. But like these scenes are, when viewed today in like the age of like, like extreme pornography on your phone, like it's almost like a throwback to the 60s kind of stuff. And it almost feels like those old nudie cutie movies in a way where you're just kind of getting a glimpse of like a photographer on a photo shoot, and there's nothing, you know, very sexual about it because they're both professionals and they're this is just their job and they're filming this for this video. So it's kind of interesting too because you get to see Debbie do that, but also being a mom and having a life. So it kind of gives it a different flavor than just kind of like, oh, let's make this movie where half the running time is these strip teases. It kind of gives it a different layer where like I said, it doesn't feel exploitive at all, but it kind of just gives it kind of like almost like a blue collar kind of thing because she's doing this to kind of pay the bills, and uh, I kind of like that about the movie too.
Yeah, and one of the things that I noticed about the other film that I watched, I kind of forgot to mention the title, but the one that I did the review on was called uh, uh, Flesh of the Unfaithful, and so so it was a more modern one. It came out like in 2025 ish, and so she wasn't doing any of the kind of the stuff that she was doing in this movie, but the thing I kind of appreciated about her performance there was that she sold it. Here's this like crazy idea of this guy called the Death Dealer, who was like a demon who would like take people's souls or whatever. It was kind of all over the place, but she could sell it. She could make it work. And I felt like here she's doing the same thing. Like she's selling this ridiculous concept of a woman who used to be a zoologist, who's now making some extra money as a doing these nudie thing, these sort of racy photos with her husband who takes the same photos, but like they're estranged. And then like you said, she got the two daughters she's trying to raise, and then this crazy neighbor comes over and just starts hanging out with her, and she's inviting him over and all that stuff. And you're almost like, why are you hanging out with this guy? But when she's talking to him and she's, having conversations and stuff like that with him, you believe it, like you buy it. She sells the whole thing.
What I think makes Debbie so kind of like above her peers is that, well, one, she's a great actress. Two, she's insanely beautiful, but also she's almost like a character actor trapped in a leading lady's body. When you see her in stuff like this, it's very, like, typical of a scream queen. But then you see things like uh, American Nightmare, where she plays the killer, and she is 1,000% invested in that character, and she could do that just as easily as she could a kind of a more risque movie. And I think that's one of the great perks of being a Debbie Rochon fan. You can, she has and she's prolific as any scream queen ever. You is finding these movies where she kind of gets to chew the scenery a little bit, or kind of just go all out and with these kind of character performances.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it's like, like you said, she's very prolific and she's done so many movies. But, and I think that's another piece that's really interesting about her is that, like Eric Roberts, for example, he does a ton of stuff. And he's fun in these little moments that he's in this movie, but he doesn't necessarily elevate a movie to another level. It's just like, oh, Eric Roberts is like kind of like just the novelty of seeing Eric Roberts in it. And I think part of this because I don't think she doesn't do a lot of like one and done kind of scenes for movies. She's in the movies a lot when she's in them, but she definitely if you're a low budget indie movie director out there and you cast her in your movie, she's going to take your movie to a different level just by being in it and performing the scenes the way she does them.
And I think she recognizes that too. I think she knows that if there's a script or a director that she really likes or is passionate about, she knows her name on the video box or streaming thumbnail, however how it is these days. Uh, a certain audience, certain distributor, they're going to pick up that movie. They're going to watch that movie, and that her just being in the movie will. That's just a way to get eyes on that movie because like I said, she has a very devoted fan base, and it's just, she just, knocks it out of the park, and I think that is why one, why directors love putting her in movies, and two, why her fans love watching her movies.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I agree. And what's interesting too about this one, if you think about like what would be the hook maybe that would bring her into the part. I mean, it is written and directed by John Russo, who I mean, we know obviously. I mean, he wrote Night of the Living Dead. He's kind of that one of those icons in the horror world. And of course, this movie is shot in Pittsburgh, where he's from. And but it's interesting when you look at his director's filmography. Like for example, this movie's not a classic on the level of Night of the Living Dead. It's not that kind of a horror movie. And he's got a lot of stuff in his filmography that he just kind of bangs them out and gets them out there. But he still has that cachet, I guess, or that reputation as being someone who was involved with one of the great horror classics of all time.
Yeah, I mean, definitely he could be one of those guys where, a project could come together based on his name. And I think, when you see, I don't mean this as to be disparaging of him in any way, but I think George Romero is responsible for the bulk of that movie's success. But Russo, somewhere in there, definitely left his mark, because I think there's at least a germ of that idea is totally his, and totally, you can't take that away from him. And when he does like a movie like Santa Claus, you can kind of see, maybe if, like I said, I don't want to be disparaging of anyway, but I mean, George Romero is one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, horror or anyway. But I think that there is a certain level of fun, creativity, and we'll say fun and creativity that Russo brings to a project.
I totally agree. And I think that's another thing. Speaking of like Lloyd Kaufman, or like a Frank Henenlotter, this sort of this cadre of directors. Now, Russo's older. He was born in 39, I think is what it said on IMDb. Whereas most of these other guys were kind of born. I think Lloyd Kaufman's probably in between there. He's probably born in the 40s, but most of them were born like 50, 51. But they grew up watching horror, and then they kind of took that mindset. I mean, Wynorski's another one, right? You think of like took the horror that he grew up with and made things like Return of the Swamp Thing. They're just absolutely amazing movies. And, Russo has some of that mindset. And it's funny, again, how these movies sort of existed in this time in the 90s where these guys were all kind of, 80s into the 90s, where these guys were really kind of coming to their own. And there was a market for this stuff so that you could get these movies out on a low budget and make some money off of them in a way that you really can't nowadays, because the money isn't there for streaming the way it was for like the video store and cable TV and that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, when it was first released, it was from like Seduction Cinema, and I think for them to like have someone like a John Russo level, and Debbie Rochon, kind of that this was probably one of their more elevated releases. And also, funny enough, now that I'm become like a wave aficionado, I didn't realize, but Terry Lewandowski is plays the killer's mom in the flashback from gosh, what was it? Dead North, I think she was. She's in a bunch of wave movies. So seeing her again, because I hadn't seen this in a few years, but now that I've seen a lot of wave movies, I was like, oh my god! So that was a nice little fun discovery to come back to.
Yeah, we also had another Wave alum, Laura Britton, the character of Laura Britton, played by Amanda Madison. I think she went under the name Christine Cavalier for this, but according to IMDb, she was also in Slaughtered Secretaries.
Oh wow, I've missed that one. I'm gonna have to get on that one.
Yeah, so I guess she was one of the secretaries that was killed by what was the guy's name? Sal. I can't think of his last name.
How long ago?
Yeah, Sal, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so he's one of. I have seen that one, and I think if I'm because with those wave movies, it's easy to kind of run them all together. But I want to say, is that the one where he was like killing the secretaries and stuffing them in a trash, like a big trash can and wheeling them out. I can't remember exactly how that one worked, but yeah, I didn't recognize her. I just looked her name up because I was like, oh, she looks familiar. Maybe I've seen her in some other stuff, and then that's. It's funny how some of the Wave movies are on IMDb and some of them aren't. So that would just happen to be on there.
Yeah, I mean, so just from that, it just creates this interesting Venn diagram of like, the creator of Night of the Living Dead to legendary 90s scream queen to actresses from Wave movies. It's just, it all kind of creates this like interesting kind of the time potpourri, I think.
Yeah. Well, and you think about it from a geography standpoint. I mean, you've got Wave films happening here in South Jersey, and then you're only about 5 or 6 hours away by car to Pittsburgh. You just hop on. I think it's I-76. Will get you there, and I think it's like maybe I think it's like a 5 hour ride and like a 6.5 hour train ride, and so. It doesn't sound like it would be that crazy, right? That like some of the actors that are doing Wave movies, their agent tells them like, oh, hey, there's something going on over here. I mean, I would imagine like Tina Kraus probably did some of those because she's done a lot of Scream Queen kind of movies in addition to Wave stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. She's like another one where I think, name recognition plus her just kind of her game kind of ready for anything attitude. Just she's like another one like Debbie Rochon, just that guys like you and me will watch just because she's in, just because she's fun, and just because she kind of like I said, she brings her A game to every project she's in.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I mean, I imagine that's got to be kind of a line on your resume. It's like, on the one hand, people might look at Wave movies and be like, oh, they're crass, and like, you don't want to maybe hide that on your resume. But on the other hand, I would think if you go to someone like a John Russo with Wave movies on your resume, he'd look at that and be like, oh, this person's going to do anything. They're up for anything. So this is great. However crazy we want to go in this movie, they'll go there with us.
And I think too, it's almost like a training ground. Like, if because some of those actresses have gone on to do, at least Santa Claus level horror films and stuff. So you can kind of get your feet wet or get your chops in these Wave movies, and then once you have a couple under your belt, you can go kind of move up the ranks to the indie horror level, and then uh, you know maybe Hollywood maybe is waiting. So I think it's a good training ground for people. I think you have to. I think if you can survive a Wave movie, you can do pretty much anything.
Right, exactly. And I mean, I guess too, with the way the ecosystem, the movie ecosystem is now, where it is harder to get your indie movies made. It's interesting. Like on the one hand, it's easier because there's so much technology that's available, and there's sort of a democratization with streaming and stuff like that. But on the other hand, it's harder because it's really hard to find ways to make money with your movies nowadays. It's hard to get things distributed. There's film festivals that it's kind of a whole politics thing to get involved with those as well. And so it's like, if you can get a name like a Debbie Rochon or Tina Kraus, or somebody like that on your on your thumbnail, like you said, or on your tin, on the tin of your DVD, it can really be a game changer. And so on the one hand, it's like, it's really hard nowadays to kind of come up, but like for this whole series of actors that we grew up with in the 80s and 90s, they now have that established name recognition, so that for guys like us that are like, thumbing through Tubi and trying to find something to watch, it's like, oh, there's Debbie Rochon, Tina Kraus. Well, okay, let me check this out. We'll see what this movie's all about.
Yeah, and two, I mean, like the Shockorama, the Seduction Cinema and Wave, they always had kind of like a you know, take one from column A, take one from column B, like kind of arrangement. They would kind of work hand in hand. And I remember too, like I think it was Scream Queens, but like other like Femme Fatales and stuff, like Wave and Shockorama, like on the back couple of pages, like in the one ad, it's like you could mail away for these movies. And at the time I never did, but it's interesting that they really haven't gone away from that mentality of just kind of like, instead of the back of a catalog or whatever, being like having a website and just kind of selling them directly to the consumer. And apparently it still works because they're still making movies like The Woman Eaters. Um, so it's interesting how like that kind of mentality still can work and survive in like the streaming world. But that I think is a testament to like that 20-30 years plus uh, just backlog of film. And like I said, like, it's like Lay's potato chips. You just can't watch just one, like once you start in with the wave movies, you're kind of hooked. So I think knowing that Gary Whitson has like that good uh, plan, like business model kind of already set in motion.
Well, and the other thing too. I mean, you think of just the United States. I mean, there's like what 350 million people in the United States. Now, granted, like you can cut out a huge chunk for just children, right? Kids aren't purchasing movies or anything like that. So it's like what I don't know how many adults it would be, but let's say it's like 200 million or something like that. I don't know what some kind of low estimate, but I mean, it's like for Gary Whitson, if there's probably a good like six figures number of people who would watch wave movies, in the United States. I think it's like that, based on the sheer volume of our population, you could find a good, three or 400,000 people that would like movies like that. And if you can just get 10% of those and get like 50,000 people to buy it, for what their overhead is for those movies, you could make some money. Now, granted, you got to find that, out of that, whatever it is, 400,000 people that whatever the number is, if you could find that 10% and get the word out to them, yeah, they're going to be fans of yours and they're going to buy your movies and they're probably going to keep buying them, right? Every time they have a little extra money, they'll buy them. So it's interesting the way distribution works in this country, because I don't think they ever think of it necessarily like that. It's always more about like, what can we get to the most people at the most time, as opposed to like like a Vinegar Syndrome or something like that, who targets a specific audience here in America that will buy these things and buy them religiously.
Yeah, I mean, it just like you said, just by the sheer number, and then you have to think about the people with disposable incomes too, and that narrows it down a little bit. But yeah, it's an interesting business model. And I think one, if the product, well, we'll say good being a relative term and for some of these things, but as long as the product is there and people want to watch it, I as long as the audience wants to watch it, I think it's a license to print money, really.
Well, because I think the interesting thing with Wave, with what they found, that's probably a little different from this movie we'll be talking about here, is that Wave found this niche where it was like, if they added certain kind of sexual sort of kink elements to the movies, that there was a subset of the audience that would be much more drawn to that they could pull from there, and so that was part of how they were able to fund their movies, and so it's interesting because this movie doesn't have a lot of it. But I did notice that every time the killer killed somebody, there was an extended strangulation element. That I mean, I don't know how many wave movies have strangulation as part of the vibe in the film, but it was interesting that was a piece of this movie, because it didn't seem like it was needed, but they did it anyway.
Yeah, and I think too, you're working with a limited budget. They probably didn't have like means to do like decapitations or any kind of gore. So like what can you deliver with with next to nothing in your budget? You can deliver these kind of struggling slash strangling sort of kind of sort of kink elements in its place.
Yeah, and of course, this would have been before the days of IMDb, where I remember joking when I first started my site, I was reviewing a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie where his character, he always goes through like that captured torture sequence, and in that one he was like tied up and hanging upside down. And I was just looking through the tags on IMDb, and I noticed one of them was shirtless male bondage. And I was like, huh, that's an interesting tag. And so I wrote about it. I did a whole paragraph like, I didn't know that was a tag on IMDb, but hey, for people that are into shirtless male bondage, this movie's got it. It's got tons of it. And that ended up being like the most popular Van Damme post for a while, because I think people were like finding that key search term and then going there and seeing that. But at that time, nowadays that's something you can do. You can insert elements into your movies and then tag them on IMDb, and people looking for those tags will see like, oh, the movie's got that. I mean, Will from Exploding Helicopter, right? Every time a movie has an exploding helicopter, it's tagged on IMDb. But back then you couldn't do that. It was really more about word of mouth, or the way Wave did it, where it was like splattered all over the cover, right? Sometimes the elements of the movie would be the title, right? Strangled sleepaway camp or something like that they would have in there.
Yeah, and I mean, going back to how I met Debbie Rochon, a lot of the way Wave worked and the way Shakarama Seduction Cinema worked, they would send these little starlets, Debbie Rochon, Tina Kraus, Debbie D, to like Chiller, or I think I met Debbie at the Horrifying convention. They would send their actresses here and there to promote, and they would have like a crate of movies. And I think I bought I think I met Darian Kane at one of these things. I think she autographed one of the erotic witch projects for me, and Erotic Survivor. And so like I think them being at these conventions and like schmoozing with some of the fans, and getting in a photo and giving autographs, I think that kind of interaction helped build that fan base a little bit too. So when Debbie branches out and does like Santa Claus, and you're going to follow her along for the ride, just because and I'm speaking in personal experience, but it's I from what I hear, I mean, she's one of the most approachable, cool, fun, willing to break your balls, kind of like just to be fun with the fans. And I think because of that, we're more susceptible to go that extra mile and say, oh, well, let me look on Tubi, see how many Debbie Rochon movies are on Tubi, and let me add all those that I haven't seen to my queue.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point, because I haven't been to the conventions in a long time, and I used to go to more of the comic book ones than any of the other ones, or like the the memorabilia ones. My buddy used to buy a bunch of Star Wars stuff, and I would buy comic books. But it's funny because I think it feels like nowadays, when I talk to like Ty, who goes to like the different conventions and things like that, it seems like it's more about like how many famous people are there, and paying to get their autographs, and having them autograph things. And and Ty usually brings like the craziest thing from their catalog to have them sign, to kind of see what their reaction, which is always a fun thing. But it does. I don't know how much is how much it's still like that now, where people are going there to try to like network and sell stuff the way that they did back then. Because I do remember that, going to some of those conventions where you'd see people there, and yeah, they'd be promoting things, and you'd be like, oh yeah, I'll check that out, or I'll take a look at that at some point.
And the way that most of it's run now, and and I've been going to them for over 20 years, 25 years, so I've seen this. And it used to be like, if there was a Brink Stevens or Linnea Quigley or somebody, you would go there, and if you bought one of their movies, they would sign it, they would get an autograph, or they would get a photo, they would personalize it. They would really bend over backwards for you. And now, and I'm not speaking of any of the ladies that we talked about, but just some celebrities in general, not any of these ladies, because I've not seen them lately. But the general mentality of a lot of the talent that comes to these things is, okay, 40, 50, $60 for an autograph, 40, 50, $60 for a photo. If you want both, that's 120. And it just seems more of a business proposition. Whereas if there was business to be had, it was the people got your business from goodwill, from, oh, you bought a movie of mine, here, let me sign it. And where now it's like, but on the other hand, that I have met some really amazing celebrities like Bill Moseley. My daughter made stuffed animals for him, and he loved it. And he gave her all this stuff. Like, he signed the chop top plate for her, like just pulled it out, signed it. He was so generous with his time. And so, I mean, there are exceptions to the rule, but I think, and celebrities have to make their money where they can. but at the same time, I think they just see dollar signs than fans for. And like I said, that's a generalization. That's not, any of the ladies that we've talked about, but just as a whole, that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, and well, and I also wonder too if like so a convention's looking at it like, oh, we can get John Cusack, for example, and in the past you'd never be able to get a John Cusack at one of those
Right.
things, and so
Right.
okay, we'll get John Cusack. Well, now John Cusack's there, and he also knows as much as they know they shouldn't be able to get a John Cusack at this thing. So he's sitting there with his baseball cap on, just like, yeah, I'll sign for $100. I'll give you a line from one of my movies for $100. I'll do, whatever. And, I'm going to sign and get you out of here as quick as I can because I don't really want to be doing this, but I'm here. I need the money. It's going to help, keep my name out there or whatever. And so then on the other hand is that, I don't know if this is necessarily what happened, but like if they're bumping or not reaching out to like a Debbie Rochon or a Linnea Quigley or, whoever, because, oh, we've got Cusack, right? And we've got to spend this much money to get Cusack. We can't afford other people. I wonder if that's part of it too, that you're seeing more of these higher end celebrities who normally wouldn't have been doing these in the past anyway. They come there, they also know that they shouldn't be doing them. And so it just kind of creates an atmosphere that just kind of overall is more about the money than anything.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And I mean, there are a lot of these things where they do have kind of like the upper tier actors and actresses in a certain ballroom or whatever, and then everybody else is on like the dealer floor or whatever. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, if you look at, if you follow the conventions online or their Facebook or whatever, you can kind of get a vibe from just their Facebook or like the talent that they're bringing in. If they're bringing in a good mix of people, like more or less, it's going to be fun. And actually, the kind of, uh, you know, uh, I think, I don't want to make generalizations because everybody's doing but I think if you see somebody like a John Cusack, you kind of expect, know what going in, what you're going to probably get. But then again, there are some really great celebrities that really do take their time and are appreciative. So it's just, like I said, it's not my first rodeo doing these things, so I kind of just call them as I see them. But every now and then, you're pleasantly surprised by like a celebrity's generosity, or so you know. But it would be nice to see like those kind of old scream queens again hitting the circuits. Like I've gotten Brink Stevens and Linnea Quigley's autographs on several things, but I've never gotten Michelle Bauer. So if she would come, in my neck of the woods, that would be great. And then that way I can get all three legends on a lot of my stuff, and I'd die a happy man.
Yes, no, that would be amazing. I mean, yeah, Brink Stevens is another one who again, someone you just grow up watching so many of her movies. She's always fantastic. I found it too. She was originally supposed to be cast in the role of Raven, and I think John Russo made that role for her. And there's a couple of scenes where there's a big painting of Brink Stevens, like a portrait of her in the background. And so I think it's like maybe a nod to that.
Yeah, and I think there was another one of the busts that were in the dressing room kind of resembled her too. So I wonder if that they had that bust made and then they realized they couldn't get her. Then they quickly made another bust of Debbie Rochon, which doesn't really look like Debbie Rochon at all. But
No, no. I mean, the other thing about Debbie Rochon, I think that's interesting, going back, mentioning, when I reviewed Ice with Tracy Lords, is like, they were a little bit younger than kind of the Scream Queens that were there in, the 80s going to the 90s, like Brink Stevens, who worked with like Fred Olen Ray and Wynorski and them in that period. Melissa Moore, I think, again, was like a little bit older, but obviously like Shannon Tweed and Julie Strain as well were older. And so like Debbie Rochon was kind of coming in as like this next generation of these actors. And so I think it's kind of cool too when you're watching ones from these like mid to late 90s, kind of seeing that tradition being carried on. And I think for me at the time, I wouldn't have necessarily thought about it because everybody was all kind of together, right? You don't really have a sense of different ages at that time the same way. Pretty much everybody who's not in high school is old, right? When you're in high school, so it's like everybody's an old person. But it is kind of cool to see that here. That like, yeah, maybe they originally were planning for Brink Stevens, but they brought in Debbie Rochon, and she kind of picks up the torch and does just as well with it.
Yeah, that's a really great point, because I think, women like her, Misty Monday, Tiffany Shepis, they were like that second class that came in like in the 90s and early 2000s, and like you said, they picked up that torch and ran with it. And now, uh, you and I being men of a certain age, now we're getting like uh, kind of like retro nostalgia for that era now, because we're like, because I know when a lot of these things first came out, they're shot on video, they're shot in somebody's backyard, but there's a charm and a quality to them that maybe you don't appreciate at the time, but as time goes on and you see more people trying to replicate that formula and kind of not doing it that well, you have an appreciation of how, that aesthetic, and just like I said, like it's funny how like that nostalgia comes around too.
Yeah, I mean, just shooting at real locations. It's just like, okay, we've got these two split level houses out in the Pittsburgh suburbs. We're going to use those for our shooting locations. But you're right, like it seems easy enough to do, right? It seems like a movie like this should be easy enough to make, but it's not. There's a lot that goes into making one of these to make it even as successful as this one was.
And one of we haven't really talked about the holiday elements of it, but what I thought was kind of interesting with this one, as opposed to like say a Silent Night, Deadly Night, or Christmas Evil, is how the evolution of the Santa suit
Yes.
kind of comes along. At first, he starts as like a character from one of Debbie's movies, and then he incorporates the Santa suit where he's just the Santa, and then he incorporates the black mask for the next victim, and then eventually he winds up being a spray painting the Santa suit black with a black mask and a little garden trowel because of the claws. So I thought that was an interesting kind of way to kind of it's not just a guy in a Santa suit killing people. It gave it a little bit different flavor.
Yeah, there's definitely a descent into madness for him, right? Where he just kind of keeps going further, and I love too that he goes to the guy who's like trying to get spare change in downtown Pittsburgh, and asks him where he got his suit, and the guy's like, "Hey, you can't come here. I'll black your eyes or something like that." And the place where they were shooting, actually, the Scream Queens where they were shooting next door was next door to the I had the name here and I just lost it. I had it, the original Oyster House in Pittsburgh. It's a place that opened in the late 19th century, and it survived the pandemic. It's still there now, so you can go to the original Oyster House in Pittsburgh and get. You can get oysters there, but they have other seafood as well, I guess. I've never been there before. I just saw it on Google Maps. So yeah, when the main character is like trying to get his Santa suit, he walks past there, scares a couple women who are walking by and everything.
Yeah, we could do a location tour.
Right, exactly.
Santa Claus pub crawl.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, what would be interesting? I'm surprised Gary went to. We have to talk about maybe doing, South Jersey tours. So I was messing around on the website on Wave because I was just curious about it, and like one of them was talking about people that want to act for them. If you're interested in acting in their movies, and the first thing they were like, you have to have a car, which because I imagine there are a lot of people like me in here in Philadelphia who don't have a car, and it's hard to get down there. There's buses, New Jersey Transit buses, and they drop you off like a good chunk of ways probably from wherever they're filming those movies. So but it would be kind of funny to have like tours of these, like you said, like some of these locations that we see these movies shot at.
Yeah, like I said, it just kind of adds to that kind of like 90s version of a Norman Rockwell Christmas, kind of like the the old town square. It's a little bit like Elves too. It looks like those department stores could that they were still kind of on their last legs there, like the standalone department stores. It looks like still of that era.
Yeah, I was gonna say because there was one in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where I grew up in downtown, that I think it would have closed before Elves was made, because it was Elves. Was it 89 or 92 for Elves?
Elves is 89.
Okay, so it I think it still might have been closed. I think it closed in like a little bit earlier than that in the 80s. What was it called? Like JJ Newberg's or something like that, or JJ Newberry. But it was there in downtown. My mom would, back then, right? You didn't go in with your mom to the store. She left you in the car and went in by
Yeah.
herself.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but
Yep.
so that was, so I don't remember how many times I actually went in there. I remember a lot of times being parked outside so she didn't have to put money in the meter while I was sitting in the car and she was running in to get stuff.
Yep. I have a couple of those stories too.
Exactly. My favorite was when I was a little bit older actually this time, and that's actually in that same area, but that was long after JJ Newberry was done. But it was in that same parking lot. Somebody started getting into the car, my mom's car, and I was kind of like just lying on the back seat, kind of trying to take a nap or whatever, and suddenly I hear somebody rattling around. Luckily, it was an elderly woman who had just gone to the wrong car. She thought it was, but I was like all freaked out, like, oh, what's going on here? What is this about?
Wow. Yeah. Well, luckily, yeah, it didn't end up too badly, but
No,
phew.
yeah, it was. Yeah, she was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I'm like, "Yeah, no, trust me." It was my mom's old Cutlass wagon that she had, so it was in pretty rough shape. So I would imagine whatever car she was getting into, if it was another Cutlass wagon, it was probably in a lot better shape than that car was. For sure. Now, one other thing I wanted to mention about the Christmas aspect of this was the kind of the goofy, twisted humor of where they would have these Christmas decorations, especially like the big like snowmen, with these goofy grins on their faces, while women are doing strip teases to cameras, with like metal, like hair, like it was kind of like hair metal music that was playing. It was, even though it was from 1996, it was like Lita Ford kind of music. But I just love these, like you get these shots of like a woman like pulling her G string down or like taking off her top, while there's Frosty the Snowman with a goofy grin on his face staring at them.
Yeah, it's a very unique blend of like Skinamax and holiday and horror, kind of all wrapped up in one.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, a lot of those touches there. Right? Maybe I'll do a quick synopsis for people who haven't seen the movie, and then yeah, we'll break down some of our other favorite scenes. So the basic premise is that a young man named Wayne. Which every time they said his name, Wayne, it sounded like the White Lion song, "Wait." So I've got that song in my head after watching the movie. But Wayne, apparently his father had passed away, and his mother is sleeping with his uncle, with his dad's brother, and they to have sex. They decided to put a sleeping pill in his drink, so they thought he would be knocked out, but no, he woke up, and he catches him in bed, and he grabs a snub nose 22 that the mom keeps for safety and kills them both. But we get the description from John Russo, actually plays the detective, who tells us that, oh, well, he's just going to be arrested as a juvenile offender. He'll get let out when he's old enough, and that's going to be the end of it. So present day, he's living next to Raven, who's played by Debbie Rochon. Debbie Rochon, she's does these exotic strip tease photo spreads, and her husband is a photographer for them as well. They're having some marital issues, and he's off in Akron doing a photo shoot while she's there in Pittsburgh trying to take care of their two kids. And his in-law, his mom and sister are not very nice to Raven. So she decides she can't bring her kids or daughters there anymore because she doesn't want to deal with them. And it just happens that Wayne, living next door, he seems like a nice enough guy. She likes him enough, and she decides to let him babysit their kid. Now, well, what we see of Wayne that she's not seeing is that Wayne has an entire shrine built to Raven, including this like weird looking bust that he bought from Scream Queens. But yeah, so while he's babysitting her kids, he's like putting sleeping pills in their drinks and knocking them out, and then going on killing sprees to kill people that are associated with Raven, in the business. And it all comes to a head when he is going on a killing spree to get her while she's doing a photo shoot, and the husband comes home. He kind of races back from Akron, finds all of that stuff, and there's kind of the big confrontation at the end. Now the thing is, he's dressed as Santa Claus, and he's killing them, like you said, with a garden trowel. So this doesn't look to be a very effective killing tool, but he does the trick. But yeah. So Mitch, what did you think of Santa Claus?
I mean, it's one of those movies, like I said, like I think I picked up at a flea market, maybe like late 90s. And it's one of I still have the VHS. Even though I bought the Blu-ray special edition not too long ago. Every few years, it's good to bring out. And, when you're in the, in the mood for a holiday horror that's not Elves or Silent Night, Deadly Night. It's like I said, it's like a solid second tier uh, holiday horror movie. And nowadays, it's almost like that. That's kind of like something that filmmakers will hang their hat on. Like I think everybody out there's tons of holiday horror movies on Tubi, like Christmas related horror movies. And back in the 90s, there really wasn't that many. So like when something like a Santa Claus came out and it's spelled Claws, well, of course you're gonna rent it. Of course you're gonna buy it. And it's got Debbie Rochon. And it's just one of those if a movie called Santa Claus spelled claws that just makes you want to see the movie. It's the kind of movie that you want to see, honestly.
Yeah, no, exactly. And the name John Russo as well for, horror geeks in the 90s. That's a name that if you see that on the tin at the video store, you're definitely going to grab it as well. I think I did see this around that time, like maybe like to your point, like late 90s. I think my buddy and I might have rented that same buddy that I would go to the conventions and stuff with that would get the Star Wars stuff. Now he was much more into horror than I was, so he knew all those names. So he would have known John Russo and said, "Oh yeah, that's John Russo." That's I don't remember us necessarily liking it when we first saw it. I think we thought it was kind of goofy. I think I appreciate it more now that I'm older. I think I probably wouldn't have necessarily even known. I would have known Debbie Rochon, but not the way I've known her now because I've seen so many more movies of hers since then. So it's another piece of it where you kind of appreciate the actors a little bit better, or at least I do when I watch something like this. But it is just like for Christmas horror, like you said, it's a genre that's kind of blown up. That it seems like everybody's doing Christmas horror movies now. This one is just a really fun one.
Yeah, and that's the key word, fun. I mean, that um, you know, I think, like I said, like if you see a movie and it's called Santa Claus and it's spelled Claws, and you're like, okay, he's Santa and he's killing somebody with a claw. In this case, it's a garden trowel, three-pronged garden trowel. Okay, that's close enough to an actual claw. We'll take it. As long as there's starlets doing strip teases every 12 to 13 minutes, I think we can handle it.
Right, exactly. Doing strip tease in front of Christmas decorations like goofy looking snowmen and white polar bears and all kinds of animals like that.
And the music, it's almost like a how-to video of how to play Megadeth and like with three chords. It's like dun 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 dun, and it just repeated over and over again.
Yeah,
That little touches like that, you gotta love.
and then the Scream Queen song with that was sung by a woman who sounded a lot like Lita Ford. There were some really great lines like you could what did you say, you can scare the pants off me anytime, I think was one of them.
Yeah, like scream queen. Yeah, I mean I wish there was a little bit more variety in the music, but what music that we did get was quite memorable.
Yeah, that was perfect. And the one thing I also loved about this is that usually these kind of stalker movies, it's the main character, it's like the Wayne character there. He's kind of off in his own place, and he's got his shrine to Debbie Rochon. So that's all the stuff that we expect at the beginning. Like that all makes sense. What was so surprising is that he comes downstairs and gives the daughters toys. Which I don't know about you, but did those look like dog treat or like cat? Like,
Yeah, I thought that too this time around that I saw it.
right? Yeah, because we would go to I remember Rite Aid would have the cat treat, the cat toy stocking. It was like kind of like the net on the outside, and it was like you could see all the toy. So that's what I thought. But anyway, I was expecting her to be like creeped out when he shows up with the toys, and instead she's like, "Oh, Wayne, great to see you. You want to come in and have dinner and help us decorate the house?" And I'm like, "Wait a second. Oh, she likes Wayne." And then they're on the couch talking, and she's like putting her hand on his arm and rubbing the back of his head and holding him by his chin to say, "Wayne, are you here? Are you with me?" Because he was daydreaming and all that stuff. And it's like, oh, she actually likes Wade, which was like a completely different twist on the stalker thing. Because usually it's like she's completely repulsed and she wants nothing to do with the guy, and he's stalking her. But in this case, it's like, oh, you probably could have had a chance with Debbie Rochon, with Raven, while she's going through this estrangement with her husband. If you just actually, not been
If you
creepy.
weren't a psycho.
Right, exactly, exactly. Which in a way, it makes her character. I don't want to say it makes her character more sympathetic because nobody should have to deal with that kind of thing. But it just added a twist to that kind of role that we don't usually see in that kind of movie.
And another kind of interesting wrinkle in that relationship, he kind of hides the fact that he's an obsessed fan pretty well.
Yes.
I think if he was more, I mean, he kind of asked like, "Oh, hey, are you doing that shoot? How's that going?" But I think if she knew like that he like obsessively watched her movies and like even ordered her bust from the back of the Scream Queen magazine, she might have been a little creeped out. But he does a good job of presenting as kind of like an average neighbor guy, and I think that was one of the interesting things too, of how he was kind of able to get so close to her, and we don't really see their interactions kind of before the movie starts, but one can kind of put together like if she is kind of being semi, not maybe some flirtatious, but at least kind of being kind of familiar with him, like touching his shoulder and doing this stuff where how he kind of could have become obsessed with her, whether it's from the movies or being her neighbor. We don't really know, and that actually kind of makes it work a little bit more. And I think too that they don't really go full maniac with it, where you're in his shoes all the time, so it's not like kind of like this repulsion. You just kind of see glimpses of his kind of obsessiveness. So I think like if they kind of went all in on that, it would have been kind of kind of repulsive. But I think the fact that there, you get a feeling like if there may have been a moment there where everything could have been okay if she had just said, Wayne, like, it's me, let stop it. I think he could have been saved. They don't really go into that area, but you kind of get a feeling that she might have been able to talk him down at some point.
Well, that's a great point too, and also, well, yeah, because like the talking him down point. Because I think what's interesting there is that her estranged husband shows up at the same time, and it's kind of the thing she's been waiting for this whole time, right? She's wanted this estranged husband to come back, and so that's another piece of it. I think if like the estranged husband doesn't come out when she come back at the same time that she realizes Wayne is the killer, she might have actually done the talking him down part. She might have actually done it, but now she's like, oh, there's my husband, he's back now and he wants to make things work between us, but we just got to deal with this psychotic maniac who's trying to kill us at the same time. But once we get past this, we can have our beautiful moment at the end of the film where we're the kids are on the swing set and the dog's chained up on to the tree or whatever, and we're doing whatever we're doing there. So that's an interesting point. And the other thing I think too is the thing you mentioned earlier about how this movie really depicts her character as a family woman at the same time that she's doing all this stuff. And you almost never see that. You almost never see that character. Maybe they're a single parent where they've got like the one child or something like that, and it's like a divorce or something. But this really wasn't that. This was her trying to balance having kids and this career. And Wayne kind of just steps in as a sort of like easy, I don't know, maybe too good to be true assistance for her, where he can watch her kids for her. But it also, to your point, like we get more of Debbie Rochon than we may have gotten in another. We probably wouldn't have gotten that much in another movie of that same character.
Yeah, it was an interesting way to do that, and going back to like if I can almost see Brink Stevens playing this role because she was a little bit older than Debbie. So the fact that she had like two kids and it was married, kind of. I think that would have played too, but I think Debbie also plays it very well, and it's like a kind of pulling back the curtain too, where like you kind of see that these starlets, they have lives, they have and they have to juggle them with their careers, and it was just an interesting take on similar material. Many movies wouldn't even bothered with they would have just went all in on the striptease.
Right. Right, exactly. Well, because this is another thing, just thinking about watching Ice with Tracy Lords recently, because I think they're both about the same age. I think they were both born in like the late 60s. And it is interesting because Tracy Lords a lot of times would play these characters in PM movies that were older than she was. And she'd be like holding her own with these guys who were born in like the 50s and 60s who were like, 15, 20 years older than her. And she was seeming older. And I think that's a good point with like Debbie Rochon. Like you said, Brink Stevens was probably supposed to play this part because, I think one of the daughters is like 10, 12 years old, which would meant that Debbie Rochon would have been like 16 or 18 when she had, which doesn't square with her character because she went to school to be a zoologist. So she would have had these kids after. So she's playing somebody older in this role and she's doing a great job of it. So kind of similar to Tracy Lords where they could play older at that time and it was believable.
Right. And typically, just generalization here, but the male audience doesn't want to see a middle-aged woman in these kinds of movies, and like I'm up for anything. I don't care, but yeah, I think that stereotypical horror fan, they've got to be young and nubile and everything. So to have a working mom slash scream queen lead, I mean, I think that in itself makes it unique, along with all the holiday horror stuff.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think and again, this is where Debbie Rochon is just so great at selling it because, and now granted, I think there's a little bit of bias to the way Wayne looks because, I have to bring my brain back to 1996 where, ponytail and a goatee wasn't so bad back then. It was kind of in style at that time. So Wayne wasn't meant to be just creepy because he's got a ponytail and a goatee. Whereas like nowadays, I think in the 90s, I think it's the 90s to the 2000s, that ponytail goatee guy branched off into two directions, right? There was one who shaved the goatee off and cut his hair short. And that was just a period of his life, where he had like probably like the chain with the on the wallet, and that kind of deal, going to coffee shops. He went off, and then the other one stayed with the ponytail and the goatee. And I think they probably added some Ray-Bans and became part of those MAGA avatar sheets that people something like that. But it's always interesting to think about that because you have to kind of bring your brain back to like, well, in 1996. If I was in a coffee shop and I saw Wayne walk in with how he looks, I wouldn't think anything of it. I would have thought, okay, Wayne seems cool enough, But now when you see somebody has that look today, it doesn't work. It's like it's kind of you're like, oh, that's the stalker, right? That's the creepy guy. But Debbie Rochon sells it really well as like, oh, she likes Wayne. We might not like Wayne. We might think we wouldn't like Wayne, but her character likes it, and it's believable that she likes him, and that kind of makes the whole thing work for like, especially like the second 2/3 of the film.
Yeah, and to your point with him not seeming creepy in the 90s, I mean, that was in the 90s. There was a whole 60s retro thing going on, nostalgia thing. So he basically just kind of looks like a stoner out of the 60s with the long hair and the scraggly beard and stuff. And like you said, nobody really would have blinked twice. Now he looks like Kid Rock stunt double or something. but yeah, it definitely kind of different vibes, nowadays.
Yeah, and it's like little elements like that kind of make a movie work more. And again, this is sort of going back to how Debbie Rochon's able to elevate a movie to a different level because it's like you're believing her as this family woman who's then also doing this other stuff. And I think the other thing where this movie was, it's a different time compared to now, is that back then there was this idea of like what is legitimate work for a woman versus like what's bad work for a woman, right? Like you've got the reporter at the beginning of the movie who's grilling the producer about how, oh, this is trashy stuff. And then Debbie Rochon, Raven shows up and the reporter, she's grilling her about it too, like saying, oh, you're debasing yourself and all this kind of stuff. And Debbie Rochon's like, hey, I like this. This is what I do. Nowadays, I think there's more of an acceptance of people talk about like, you shouldn't be, the sex work is considered a legitimate pursuit, and it's not something that people should be looked down upon for doing that kind of thing. And I think it's interesting this movie goes into that back then, almost 30 years ago now. Next year it'll be 30 years since the movie came out. And of course, back then people just didn't want to listen to it. It's like, no, if you take your clothes off, you're not considered serious, or whatever. It's not, considered a it's not considered I want to say a respectable pursuit. And this movie's talking about that in a way that 30 years later, finally it's like, oh yeah, if a woman's got an OnlyFans and that's how she wants to make money, that's fine. We accept that. But back then we didn't. And I like the way that they had that juxtaposition with her being a family woman who's making money the way she's making money. And in her case, she's not even, it's not even really that bad, on the scale of what they would consider bad. But it's still having that discussion, I thought, was a really good thing.
And the fact that they even get into like the double standard of, oh, it's okay for her husband because he's taking the photos, but
Right.
she's looked down upon because she's the one that's actually in the nude. So it's like you said, like they cover some interesting ground for what, from the outset just kind of looks like it's going to be a TNA Christmas slasher.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I think it's one of those things that I don't know how I would have, like, I think I would have seen it if I'm seeing it with 90s eyes, at that time period. I would have seen it as like kind of this fugazi way that the movie was trying to, I don't know, absolve itself from being, gratuitous in a sense. Whereas now I look at it and say, now that I'm an adult as well, I can look back and say like, okay, no, this, people shouldn't have been looking down on women for doing this for work. And like you said too, it's sort of like, again, it gets back to that exploitative element of it, that, oh, the cameraman's okay, right? The guy who's directing the porn movies is okay, but the people acting in the porn movies, that's the issue.
Yeah, and it's like I said, and I think them, I'm presumably filming in the same studios where they're actually making the magazine and stuff. I I think, whether it was Russo or people that were just working on the film, they probably had those feelings about that, and they wanted to, they'd made, whether it was osmosis, I think that kind of feeling kind of seeps in there, and even the producers like, hey, like, I just make these movies, and people enjoy them. There's nothing wrong with them, and I think that was kind of the mission statement for all involved.
Yeah, because you've got that reporter there who is definitely a lot. I don't know. Nowadays, I mean, you definitely wouldn't see a reporter going for like Trump, maybe Biden, because they would want to be try to get to Biden back then to make it seem like he was like a doddering old man or something. But it doesn't seem like reporters now. It's like kind of like access reporting, where you want to be friends with the subject and sort of get your information that way. I mean, you see some kind of hard hitting reporting, but there's always this sense that reporters were like out there doing like the hard hitting stuff. And it's funny how this woman here is presented kind of that way, and it almost like in this antagonistic way, right? Where she's like, first she's talking about how horrible the producer is, and then when Debbie Rochon comes in, she's giving her a hard time as well. And yeah, I mean, like, again, I don't think if a reporter tried to do a story like that today, the moment that thing got posted on social media, you would have a bunch of kids, especially Gen Z kids, would be in there just being like, no, you don't give someone a hard time for doing making money in that way, because there's nobody's being harmed, nothing's wrong there. You shouldn't be looking down on people for that. And you wonder, I guess, if she'd put that article out in Pittsburgh in the 90s, she probably would have gotten like some I don't know if she would get a Peabody for it, but she would have gotten probably more praise for it.
Well, you have to think too that even sentiment is of the time when you think about what was on the air, like Morton Downey Jr., Current Affair, stuff like that. Those kinds of like news magazines really were kind of like muckraking and looking down upon women and chastising them for doing stuff like that. So even that element of it is a very mid 90s sentiment.
Yeah. I remember a Rolling Stone article about like Current Affair, hard copy. My mass accent, my New England accent just came out there. I said hard copy, but and then there was the one that Geraldo did. I can't remember the name of Geraldo's one, but he had his own one. And I remember they were interviewing a woman who was a reporter that worked on for I think for Geraldo's and maybe also Current Affair, and she remembered like Geraldo giving a speech to a room that was at least half women, but I think she was saying it was even more so. And he's like, yeah, you got to really feel it in your balls when you go in there. And they're like, what are you talking to us about balls for? Like, like, why would you, why are you like, but it was like this idea of like this kind of this seedy, like men's club kind of thing where, like you said, it was just like getting out there, muckraking, coming up with as many salacious stories as possible. And yeah, I kind of forgot about that, because I was just thinking of the woman being combative as a reporter, but you're right. Like she's also trying to like move the needle ratings wise the way that news was back then.
Yeah, and it just kind of it's a nice way too, you know, for the producer who's Carl Hardman from Night of the Living Dead. There's a lot of Night of the Living Dead uh crossover talent in here too, but it just like I just like the way that he kind of like pumps the brakes. It's like, whoa, 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 we're this, it might not be what you like, but this is, we're producing entertainment here, and that here's our starlet, and she'll tell you more about it. I thought it was a good way, and like I said, like I think that whole thing was the mission statement of all involved, and there was a way to kind of for them to wear their heart on their sleeve a little bit.
Yeah, and again, that comes going back to Debbie Rochon's character. That comes after she's walking through downtown Pittsburgh, window shopping for her kids. Kind of walking around town looking for things for them, and then she goes into the studio there next to the Oyster House. So yeah, it's kind of funny, like you said, that you get these movies that on the surface it's just some kind of low budget wacky guy in a Santa suit on a killing spree kind of film, which is fun in and of itself. But then when you're able to peel back these layers and see some of the kind of the stuff that they were saying, that again, it's a message that people wouldn't want to necessarily have heard back then, but at least they're getting the message out.
Yeah, and that's why, when you look back at some of this stuff, it's almost like archaeology. It's kind of finding where, like you said, like moving the needle of, kind of where the tides were going, and you can kind of see a little bit of the sea change, however, minimal, but like how this, differs from like a Silent Night, Deadly Night 4 or so.
Yeah, I think too, talking about us and our generation, and I think it's important maybe too to think of like our age cohort kind of being like kind of late 70s, early 80s, being maybe a little different from like other Gen Xers from like the late 60s, early 70s, where I think, because my wife, a lot of times she'll be on the Gen X like subreddits and things like that, and she'll be seeing the interactions, and it's interesting where like the older Gen X crowd can be sometimes more in line with like kind of younger boomers or young, the boomer generations when it came to things like, the way they would talk about women and the way that they would talk about these kinds of things. And I think maybe our age group was one of the kind of the early ones that were saying like, no, this is cool. Like, this is, we shouldn't be giving these women a hard time for taking their top off in a movie like this. We shouldn't. This is a legitimate pursuit for making money. This is a legitimate way to earn a living. And I think then as you get into like the millennial age cohort after us, that really started to kind of push these ideas. And now Gen Z is fully like, yes, you don't disparage a woman for making a living through sex work, or a man as well. You don't disparage anybody for making a living through sex work. I think our age group, maybe we see some of these kind of movies and stuff like that, and we kind of hear these messages. And I think to some extent it did kind of plant a seed maybe for us, where as time went on, we would be more open to it, to those kinds of ideas. And I think from there, other age groups looked at it more and said, no, we should not be looking down on women for doing this kind of work.
Well, I think a lot of that is just the hypocrisy, like people um that make these movies, that watch these movies, that if you're like me, I have a whole collection of Debbie Rochon movies and Skinamax movies and Scream Queen movies. I like there that's the furthest thing from my mind when I'm watching these movies, is like, oh, she should keep her clothes on. So like that's why I'm watching it. I'm supporting these movies. I'm as time goes on, I try to champion these movies, because I think unfortunately for the younger generation, these kinds of movies get lumped into uh, almost pornography, where, oh my gosh, she's nude, therefore, and I think, if you didn't grow up with scrambled porn, it's hard to kind of, really tell you how, when you see movies like this, it kind of, it works now for me as nostalgia. So but I think that there are people out there that, watch these movies, or, use sex workers, and they hate themselves for doing that. Therefore, they go out on these, holier than thou tirades about, uh, anti-sex work. So it's one of those things, like, I just look at myself like, hey, I watch tons of these movies. I'm going to celebrate everything that these ladies are doing. So, whereas these senators and whoever, people online and stuff that are anti-sex worker, I mean, how many hookers and strippers and everything have they paid in their time? So, like I said, I think it comes down to hypocrisy, really.
Right. No, exactly. I think that's the case. And I think maybe our generation was maybe that our age cohort was the first ones to start to maybe, I mean, I guess I shouldn't say we were the first ones because obviously everybody making this movie is a lot older than, or not a lot older, but everybody making this movie was older than us. So they were already starting to kind of work that way. But I guess maybe their message was getting through to us, that we were seeing and saying like, yeah, why should, this TV reporter look down on Raven for, taking racy photos to make a living. Like, why she shouldn't be looking down on her. Nobody should be looking down on her for doing that. But at the time you would think it would just be a natural thing. Like, oh, somebody's in Playboy. Well, that they're taking their clothes off for Playboy. It's a bit, it's a huge thing or whatever. It's like, and it's like, oh, well, now can we, respect them doing other stuff or whatever. It was almost like it was this question, right? It's like almost like if you did Playboy, it was like almost like a career killer in a way, right? You could only do certain other work after because you had done Playboy or whatever. Like remember what was it Vanessa Williams, right? Was Miss USA and she was stripped of her title because she had done Playboy before, I think, right before she won. And this movie's questioning that, and there's probably other stuff at the time that was questioning that as well. That I think for us watching it, we'd say like, yeah, you know what, we should question that. That shouldn't be. We've been fed this idea of like what's legitimate work and what isn't legitimate work, and now I mean, another not to compare doing photo shoots and things like this to being a sanitation worker, but I think it's always like, oh, you don't nobody wants to be a garbage person, but it's like, no, that's like actually a job that really matters in our society, right? Like it's a job that actually does something really important. Like we shouldn't look down on that kind of a role. So I mean, you probably heard it as well. Like when we were growing up, right? Our parents would be like, "Oh, you don't want to be flipping burgers," and it's like the real reason we don't want to be flipping burgers because that's a really hard job, not because it's it's like you're not going anywhere in life. It's because it's a really difficult job, but it's an important job, and so yeah, I think, these kind of things started to kind of do it for us. And then I think later generations started looking at it more like, no, you shouldn't question what people do for a living if it's not harming anybody. And it's not, and again, like this guy was saying, no, we're not harming anybody when we make these photos. And I think it's like to your point, you're collecting these movies and stuff. You're not thinking like, oh yeah, I'm looking down on any of these people, right? You're thinking like, hey, this is a great performance that these people are giving in these movies.
Yeah, and I think too, like, when we try to pick these movies too, there's a little bit of curation that goes along with it. And we try to get a little bit of everything, I think, to talk about. And we've had some Scream Queen adjacent stuff here. And I think, when like you said, just talking about Debbie and Christmas movies in general, and we're like, I think this is like one of those movies that kind of checks a lot of people's boxes that they would want to that they'd be interested in, whether they're interested in like kind of low budget 90s horror, Christmas slashers, Scream Queens, Debbie Rochon, even Night of the Living Dead. I mean, it checks a lot of boxes, and I think when movies that check a lot of boxes, sometimes that's all they do is check boxes. But to have one has a little bit more to it than kind of what you expect, that just kind of makes it, like I said, I come back to it every couple of years, because not just because I like watching Christmas horror movies, but like it's a legitimately fun movie, and it like, as we've discussed, like it's got a little bit more going on than your typical fare.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I think that is kind of what it's one of the elements, like you said, that like so many people try to make Christmas horror movies now. Like you said, like so many directors, like they got to make their own Christmas horror movie, and it's hard to replicate because this one there's an earnestness to how this one's made, but then like you said, we were saying that there's these layers below it of the different elements of the movie that it didn't need, right? It could have been a fun movie without those elements, and that just makes it even better with those elements.
Yeah, and like I said, it's got good replay value. And it's one of those kind of movies too that, I mean, depending on the group, because depending on how they'll react to the striptease numbers, but it plays good with a group of people. It's like a good pizza and beer movie. It's just what in like too, for like regional filmmaking. Like we're both kind of sort of in the you know Pittsburgh adjacent area, so it's nice to see that kind of East Coast kind of uh, look to the town being represented. So, like I said, it's just it on all fronts. It gets the job done.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, yeah. To your point about being, kind of the Pittsburgh adjacent, it's almost like you could hear the Mid Atlantic accent of sort of like this Philly into Delaware into Maryland. You could hear that accent changing into a Midwest accent as you're moving out west, and so it's like the Pittsburgh accent feels like it's got elements of this accent out here, but then also accent elements of like Chicago. It's kind of funny how you can watch these movies and hear how those accents move. But like you said, it still has a kind of like a local kind of Northeast feel to it. I've never been to Pittsburgh before. I've always wanted to go. Now, I mean, the big thing is I got to see a baseball game there at some point. That's kind of like my, check off another park off the list. But then also now I've got to check out this Oyster House because that's like another element.
Yeah, you get. I mean, after like the third time he walks by, you start going, "Man, I want some oysters, man."
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. I was kind of surprised that the woman standing in front of the Oyster House when that when Wayne is going to get his Santa Claus suit, the woman standing outside there, she's wearing an L.A. Kings coat instead of a Pittsburgh Penguins coat. So I don't know how popular she was in Pittsburgh at that time with that coat on. But
I don't know, maybe the Kings were in town and she was,
right, she was visiting from LA. They were going to check out I mean, that actually kind of makes sense now that I never thought of it like that, because that's probably a place you would go if you were visiting Pittsburgh, is you'd go to the Oyster House.
Yeah, I mean, if you take in the game the night before, and then see the town, the day after, or vice versa.
Yeah, because Pittsburgh. I guess at that time, I think Gretzky had joined. No, '96. He was done with the Kings by then, I think. Yeah, well, yeah. But I just happened to notice. I was like, oh, they're going to the Oyster House. But yeah, you're going to you're flying into Pittsburgh to see the Kings play, and stop at the Oyster House, and you end up in Santa Claus the movie. So, well, yeah. I mean, one other quick thing I wanted to mention too, when you're talking about the nostalgia element, because we've talked about this with the Wave films, and whenever you watch a movie, a lot of times, a low budget indie movie, they're going to use whatever they've got available. But a lot of times when it comes to things like the cars, it's either like a PM movie where they're getting all the junk cars that they can get so they can trash them later, or it's like, product placement if it's a bigger budget movie. And one thing I always love about these movies is they're just using whatever cars that they've got. It's people using their own cars in a lot of cases, just like with the Wave movies. So you get a real slice of cars. And I never would have thought in 1996 that I'd be looking back 30 years later being like, oh, I'm kind of curious for the nostalgia of 90s cars. But you see some types like the one that Wayne was driving around that or was it Debbie? I can't remember, whoever was driving the white kind of vanish car there. I'd forgotten that model even existed.
Yeah, it's funny what you get nostalgic for. Yeah, like it's like it's like seeing like a Dodge Neon with historic plates now. It's like how does that work? And you try to wrap your brain around it. By the time you think about that, you missed your exit. You got to like circle back.
Right, exactly. Well, 'cause I looked into that. I was curious about what that meant to like, if you like you said, because I've seen that too, the Dodge Neon with the vintage plates or whatever. And it's like, what it is, I guess, is that if you get a car with vintage plates, or antique plates like that, you don't pay as much to get it registered, and it's like cheaper on taxes and everything, but you're technically only supposed to drive it to get it ready for car shows, which back then it made sense. Like in the 80s, it made sense because you were talking about cars from the 50s that you were getting ready for car shows, and of course that was like a fun thing to go and see 50s cars. I mean, I don't know. Are people in 2025 going to vintage car shows to see old Dodge Neons driving around?
I think people, and I'm not speaking for anybody that I know, but I think people do it to get that
Right.
that discounted rate, and then they just hope and pray that the cop doesn't pull them over with sitting there like counting his odometer, but because I think you can only put a certain amount of miles on those cars before like they take that away. Like I think the oddest historic plate I've seen, and this is fact, I saw a Scion with historic plates, and you just have to shake your head like how? And I was like, they have to just be doing it for the discounted rate because why else?
Right. Yeah, the one I saw was a Dodge Dodge Aries, like midnight blue. What it would have been midnight blue back in when it was in its heyday in the late '80s, and yeah, it was down here in Philly, and I thought it was the greatest thing ever. And that was when I learned. I was like, I had to look up everything because I was like, I gotta know, how does a Dodge Aries get to have vintage plates? And it was like, you know. It was from like 87, so it was actually kind of well beyond the number. But it's like, I guess if you're here in Philly and you're not really leaving the city much, it works perfect because you can just kind of drive around the city. But, I don't know what the rule is for how much you can drive, and stay within the bounds of like, I'm just making sure it's okay for when I take it to the car show.
Yeah, I'm not sure the specifics, but I think like you can't crack a certain, couple hundred or couple thousand miles over, whatever you get your car registered for. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it like I said, it like, it's funny, like, guys like, of a certain age, you and me, we hear historic and like we 2000 doesn't sound historic to us, but for others that's like ancient history. So,
Right.
but I mean, it's the same as saying, 1975 or whatever when we were, running around in 2000. Like, oh man, that was a long time ago, and it really, in the scheme of things, not really.
No, well, it's funny because my wife watches MeTV a lot, and they've been showing shows from the 2000s, like Everyone Loves Raymond, the second
Yeah, that
Raymond.
that made me feel old. I saw that the other day. I just had to turn the channel.
Yeah, and people say like, well, like it's the same as like old music, like if you're listening to retro, like, oh, it's 25 years ago, and I was like, but like if I'm listening to like a 70s rock station, I don't want to hear Shaggy on my 70s rock station. I don't want to hear It Wasn't Me. And to me, like that's the same thing. Like Me TV should be like it should be my 70s classic rock station. Like I shouldn't have anything later than, I mean, I don't know what the number. I guess Happy Days ran into the 80s, right? So I guess if the show started in the 70s and ran into the 80s, then I guess maybe that's enough for me. But anything later than, and nothing that started in the 80s, I don't think. I guess I don't know, because then yeah, because if that means you can't play Archie's Place, then I'm okay with that. I don't need to see Archie's Place.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like when you hear, Weezer on the so-called classic rock channel. It's like how does that happen? How did we go from 60s and 70s as oldies to 60s, 70s, and 80s, and now I'm just turning the old man yells at cloud. But I mean, it's one of those things that you just have to. It just you live your life, you run around, you do what you're supposed to do, and the next thing you know, that the music that you listen to is labeled old people music.
Right, it's classic rock, exactly.
It's like, it's like that's the thanks we get.
Right, exactly. But the thing is that like I like for the stuff from the early 2000s that is technically 25 years old now and would count for classic rock the way like stuff from the early 70s counted as classic rock in the 90s. For me, I guess and I guess maybe with how Spotify and those things are now that like you should just have everything curated yourself. And I guess I kind of want my TV the same way. Like I want an era of TV to exist as that era. I don't want, don't add more stuff to it. I don't need Tim Allen on my same channel that I'm getting, Emergency, or Adam 12 or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird, like when they make the jump from like MASH and Taxi to like Seinfeld and Everyone Loves Raymond. I just feel like there's a cultural jump somewhere. They gotta cushion the blow somehow and put some, like, it's like I said, but all those syndicated shows, they eventually do that. They eventually age themselves up, and when I was a kid, like you'd come home and it would be like, uh, Leave It to Beaver and Andy Griffith, and then a little bit later it would be Taxi and Mary Tyler Moore, and then by the time you're in high school, they're playing Simpsons and stuff. So it does phase up slowly. But it's always nice when you find a channel like BTV that kind of comes in the 50s, and we had a good run there. I mean, BTV's been on for about 10 years, and that now they're finally getting to the 90s stuff. So they just need to have a more ancient channel come along for us to gravitate to.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. My last sort of old man, yelling at cloud thing was I was in Trader Joe's the other day, and the kids that were working there must have put on the quote 90s mix. Because the music went from like Sarah McLachlan, Adia, to I Alone by Live, to Weak in the Knees by SWV. And I'm like, if you were growing up in the 90s and you were at a party and somebody played those three songs together, you'd take them away from the record player, like, or the CD player, right? You'd be like, nope, you're cut off. Get away from there. You got to, and just like this idea, but because for them, they're like, well, all 90s stuff just gets all thrown together and it's all one thing. And it's like, no, they're different genres. It's like you want to tell the kids, like, come on, get a good DJ in here and play some real 90s stuff like on a consistent basis. Either go alternative with with Live, or go with the Lilith Fair stuff with Sarah McLachlan, or go with the R&B stuff with it, but don't mix it all together.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, like I've heard, like, I forgot where I was. We were Christmas shopping or something in Bed Bath and Beyond, and it was like you said, three songs, and it was like no sane person would listen to these in a row if they lived in that actual time or time era, and it's just irksome. It's like, but to them, like, it's just a big potpourri of I think it was like Lauryn Hill, and then Weezer, and then it was like just something like I think Walking in Memphis or something. Oh, right. It was like something that just did it. It was like no comprende. Like, I can't do this.
No. It's just one of those things. It's like, we're, like you said, we're getting old, and I guess the one saving grace we have is that between the fact that like Tubi has this movie as Santa Claus, or like you were able to get there's a 4K version out there now. Like, there's enough of a fandom that they know there's a market for that. We can kind of go back to these movies, and it does bring me back to that time, like in the 90s, even in the 2000s. My buddies and I would rent the ones from the 90s because there's just something about that period of time. The look is a little bit different from the 80s movies, and the outfits and everything are a little bit different from the 80s ones. So they had their own kind of feel, like almost like a USA Up All Night kind of feel to them that just is so great from a nostalgic level.
Yeah, have you watched the new Up All Night?
No,
with Rhonda? Yeah, it's actually amazing. It's great. I don't know how they did it, but so many of these things, when they bring them back, it's just kind of missing that certain something. But it just feels like it's like 1994 again, and Rhonda hasn't missed a step. It's really fun.
I have to check that out because I think Fred Olin Ray posted something about it on his Facebook.
He was on the last episode. Okay. He was giving out. They brought him out. He had the little graduation hat and the robe and everything, and he was giving away Scream Queen certificates. It was something. It like I said, it brought a smile to my face. Like, I mean, Joe Bob was great, and I like the new Joe Bob and stuff, but it seems like a new version of what he used to do. Whereas this, it just seems like the next episode, right? Like they haven't missed a beat. It's whatever secret sauce they have. It's awesome.
That's awesome. Now, it's not on USA anymore, right? Is it on streaming?
No, it's on YouTube.
YouTube. Okay.
It's just search Rhonda Shear. It's called Rhonda Shear Up All Night. It's not called USA, but I mean the opening, the font, everything is the same. They just don't say USA.
Oh, all right. I got to check that out then. That sounds amazing because this movie definitely made me feel like, I don't know if I don't remember ever seeing this one on, because it came out in 96. So it was a little late for Up All Night, but the film quality,
the vibe is there.
Yes, exactly. So that's all right. I'm going to definitely check that one out for sure then too. Well, I guess we should transition into it. Again, I can't believe we're already back here this year. I feel like we were just here talking about elves like just yesterday, and we're already back at Christmas time. But this is it. This is the yearly tradition that we're having now on the podcast, where Mitch comes on and talks about his favorite, and one that I've definitely up there is one of my favorite Christmas movies of all time, Elves.
Well, I feel like Vincent Price sitting up by the fire with the "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" by the fireplace. But yeah, the Elves is just one of my favorite movies. Period. And if for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's the tender tale of what happens when Nazis try to breed the perfect soldier, which of course means creating an elf that must mate with the Virgin of Anti Christmas to breed the the Antichrist who will bring about the apocalypse. And it's just Dan Haggerty is the department store Santa, former detective, who tries to help our young heroine fight the Nazis and the elf before the soul shattering climax and one of the greatest final shots of any movie ever. It's the only movie I think that uh, rips off both Chinatown and Dawn of the Dead, and it's just it's just one of the greatest Christmas movies of all time.
Yeah, when you first told me about it, because I hadn't seen, I'd heard of it when you first mentioned it, but I hadn't seen it, and I did watch it. I think before that time, and I've watched it a couple times since then. I didn't get a chance to watch it before our conversation here. I'm going to probably watch it. Well, I guess you haven't done your yearly viewing, right? Do you do it Christmas Eve or?
We do it on the 23rd.
Okay.
See that back, I would say 1992, we rented Elves and Black Magic Woman, and thinking Black Magic Woman was going to be the headliner because Mark Hamill and Apollonia in a erotic thriller. We were like, oh man, this is gonna be great. So we just got Elves because it was Christmas themed, and it was December 23rd, 1992. We rent those two movies, and Black Magic Woman was it was fine, whatever. Nothing in the entire universe could have prepared us of what Elves was going to do to our brains, because they were just lime jelly after that. And so the next year rolls around, we're like, we gotta watch a movie, and of course, what could compete with Elves? Nothing. So we rent Elves the next time, and the next year, and the next year, and then I think around 97, 98, my brother went to the video store and was like, hey, can we just buy this? Like, he got it for me for Christmas. And she looked at the lady looked in the computer, is like, your account's the only account that's ever rented this movie. So of course, like, she sold it to him, and so we watched it then, and it's just you know uh I actually met my wife on Elves Day, December 23rd, 2005, and she wasn't there for the first that first year, but every viewing, she's watched Elves, and it's very hard for her to watch a movie twice once she knows all the secrets and everything. She doesn't like to rewatch Elves. She's seen dozens of times, and we always try to get a big gathering of people at my house for Elves, and we quote. I mean, it's almost like Rocky Horror Picture Show at this point, but we still discover like new and funny and weird things about it, viewing after viewing, and it's that communal experience that it just makes it, just so much fun.
Yeah, that's such an amazing thing because, yeah, I mean, there's so many different pieces there. I mean, like one, I mean, can you imagine going to Blockbuster and saying like, "Oh, can we buy this movie?" Right? Like the teenager behind the counter would be like, "What? No, I'm gonna ask my manager." I don't know, Where it's like that was like the beauty of the mom and pop, right? Is that they could look, they would recognize you, they'd look in the system and be like, because the same thing happened to my buddy and I with Bad Taste. We were renting it so much that we jokingly reserved it one time because we were renting it so much, and they got a kick out of us reserving it. So, but I love that you bought the copy, and then having the parties around it, because it is one of those ones. I mean, I haven't showed it to my wife yet, partly because there's this scene where the cat gets killed by the mom. and I don't know if my wife would be able to handle that scene. But I mean, the Dan Haggerty as the mall Santa, who was a former cop who's now doing a mall Santa because he got let go from the force. And then he's fighting a Nazi created elf, right? The movie's called Elves, but it's just one elf that he's fighting
Just
against.
one elf.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's just such an amazing. The whole thing is just so amazing, and it is like one of those things where like it's a very dark movie. Like on the surface, it's meant to be a very dark movie, but it's got all these goofy elements here that you can't take the dark seriously, despite how dark it is. Yeah, the thing for me too is the Dan, when the movie came out in '89, I would have been 10, and I didn't see it, of course, until I was much older. But thinking about me watching, if I'd been like your age watching it, I would you would have been thinking like you were like the kids in the movie, right? That are like having the party at the mall and all of that stuff. And it was funny when I watched it back in 2022 or 2020. I was not as old as Haggerty. I think Haggerty was 48 when he made the movie. So I'm still not quite there yet. But um, I I guess I identified more with Haggerty as the guy running the mall who's like letting the kids have their party than I did the kids having the party, which was a kind of a funny shift for me. But it's one of those things with Haggerty now as I'm getting older. I see more of myself as Haggerty than the kids in the movie.
Well, I mean that's the sign of a great movie where you can visualize yourself in in multiple character shoes. Similar to the way I view Mr. Mom. Like when you watch Mr. Mom as a kid, you're like, oh, it's a fun kids movie, but like now you watch it as an adult, and as somebody who's a father, I'm like, oh, this shit ain't funny. This shit could happen. And this is like a documentary. So like yeah, you're definitely in with like Michael Keaton, but it's like it's very like yeah, like you said, when you're watching it as a teenager, you're kind of your alliances kind of just normally gravitate towards those teen characters. And now yeah, Dan Haggerty is just kind of like the perfect down on his luck everyman who just delivers a beautiful performance. And I'm not saying that in a snarky any kind of way. He has some monologues in this that are just, heart wrenching, and he's just delivering it with, he's given 110%. While at the same time, in other scenes, knowing exactly the kind of movie he signed up for and playing it as kind of, with this kind of like sly twinkle in his eye. So it's just a multifaceted, just brilliant performance.
Well, because he also like he's almost like this paternal figure to the main character who's like her dad's dead, but also or she thinks her dad's dead, but then she finds out with a twist that actually no, her grandfather is her dad, and so she's like in desperate need of like an adult like figure in her life. And here's Haggerty coming in, being like, yeah, I'm gonna blow up this mall while I'm trying to kill this elf, but at the same time, yeah, I could be a dad figure for you. I can take care of you, if you need. Which it is kind of funny that like and like to your point, like he reads this role. And while he's reading all the goofiness, he's also reading this part where he's like, this poor girl is getting put through all this stuff, and I'm like my character's like the closest thing to like some kind of stability in her life, and so he took that part seriously, which is just amazing.
And he's got a lot going on too. He's there's a whole subplot with him being an ex-alcoholic, and he's losing his trailer. He gets evicted from his trailer, and has nowhere to turn to on Christmas. So he takes to kind of living inside the department store. And one of those things that you don't really respond to when you're a teenager and you're watching it is the scene where he's all alone in the dressing room where the previous Santa has been murdered, still has the blood stains.
Right.
And he's sitting there and he's highlighting passages from the Alcoholics Anonymous like manual, and it's heartbreaking. It's like God, that's how this guy's spending Christmas. This is before the Nazi he even lays eyes on the Nazi elf. So it's like it's almost there's like this almost like I don't know. I guess if he was still drinking, it would be a Bukowski kind of imagery, but like it's just like that really down on his luck kind of depressing thing that you normally don't see in a Christmas movie.
No, and then he hears the kids partying outside, and he's just like, again, like the dad, he's just like, or like the uncle, I guess, he's just like, all right, just keep it down and don't break anything or whatever. It just goes away, and then the next thing he knows, there's a murderous Nazi elf that's like taking over the sporting goods section. But it is like that moment where like the kids are partying. Because I mean, even just that idea, right? Department store, like closing a department store down and partying there, and it was like, it's kind of like, what is it, Rodbell's on Roseanne? It's like that kind of a department store where like there's like a food counter and there's like donuts and stuff there, and yeah, and then like you said, there's poor Haggerty in the back room hearing the sound of these kids partying while he's so down on his luck. But he got some purpose in having to fight these elves, or this elf.
And you have this heart-wrenching scene of him, and and it's sad and depressing. And then minutes later, we cut to the shootout between Haggerty and the Nazis, and on the gun counter in the department store, there's a sign at the gun counter that says "Great gift idea for mom." It's like there's like the movie works on so many levels, and and honestly, like I said, I've been watching it for over 30 years, and I'm still you still pick up weird themes or weird little just it's just a brilliant movie, and it really, I keep saying it needs to be picked up by Vinegar Syndrome, but I think we need to shoot higher. I think Criterion needs to get involved.
Oh yeah, yeah. We need like like they do those kind of like self-indulgent, oh, such and such indie actor is in the Criterion closet picking things out, and then it's like, then you have like the comment section, everybody's like, oh my god, I can't believe they picked that one, oh, it's so great. And then of course there's always like the guy who's like really full of himself, who's like, I don't know if I would have picked that one, I might have picked this one instead, but really great choice there by so and so. I just love the idea of an actor going in there and picking out elves, and like the comment section losing their minds and not knowing what to do with it.
Well, I mean, it's just it needs recognition of some kind, and whether it's a rights issue or a mastering issue, I think it deserves a physical release of some kind. And if anybody is putting that together, I'm just throwing it out there, I would do a commentary for free. I would do several commentaries. I would even film my annual Elves party and make it a special feature. Whatever I have to do to be involved, I would label myself as the Elves aficionado. So my door's always open.
Well, I mean,
I'm not begging for a job, but yeah, I'm begging for a job, because if there's one thing I'm qualified to do in my entire resume, it would be this.
The Elves commentary, which would be amazing. I mean, comparing this to Santa Claus in terms of critic reviews, Elves has a bunch more critic reviews, as far as I can tell, than Santa Claus does. And Santa Claus has a 4K release. I think it's the mastering issue. I think that's the problem. Is that I think I don't know if they have anything other than the VHS copy to work from. But I think that's what it is. I mean, because this was like, it was an AIP distributed movie, but I don't think it was made by AIP, right?
Right. I think it was picked up. It was like almost like a regional horror movie that was picked up by AIP. And uh, you know, the early, it was still kind of like in those early days of the independent boom of VHS. Marketing and distribution, and it was all about product. They need product, and it's kind of like the content wars of today. But and a movie. All I needed really was Dan Haggerty's name to really kind of, that was enough at the time to get it on shelves. And I think, um, it's just one of those movies too. Oh, and I have, speaking of AIP, uh, every year when we watch my video copy, there's a preview for the Eric Estrada AIP movie Alien Seed. So that's
Nice.
part of the experience as well. The trailer, I highly recommend looking up the trailer because it's a laugh a second. And the movie, when you watch the movie itself, it's not that great, but they put all the sizzle reel together for that 2-minute trailer, and it's hilarious, and it's become part of the event. So anybody out there, I think it's on YouTube. Just Google the Alien Seed trailer Eric Estrada, and you will get your money's worth.
Yeah, I definitely just check that out too. I mean, that's one of the great parts too about the old VHS days is that you had those trailers in the movies, and I mean, it initially there was a sense of like, oh, you got to fast forward through those, but now it didn't take long for it was like, I want to see what these trailers are about. And I don't know how many movies I learned about through trailers, which is such a fascinating concept because when I go to the movie theater now, I'm like, I don't want to see any of these movies that I've seen trailers for. But back then, I was like, oh, this Down the Dragon Wilson movie looks great. And I think that's how I learned about China O'Brien. And yeah, I can imagine like seeing Alien Seed being like, oh, well, I got to go check that movie out now. Let's see what Eric Estrada's up to.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, and I did this at one point, and of course, by the time we moved 2 or 3 times, I lost it. But I used to have to do the old 2 VCR trick,
Oh yes, yeah.
and every time I'd find a movie at the flea market or whatever, if it had any kind of trailer, I would tape whatever trailers. So I had at least 2 hours of trailers, and of course, over time that tape got lost or ate or something. But I remember because I think it was about the same time when Ryan Kenner was sending me stuff. So he sent me like the whole Blood Fist series basically. So I had like all these Concord, New Horizon trailers, like Maria Ford, Don the Dragon Wilson. There was like a whole run. And I just remember watching that one day. I was like, maybe that's another thing I should do. If anybody's out there, I can curate a trailer tape for you. But yeah, that is an art in and of itself.
Yeah, no, that is amazing. Yeah, it's funny because I think you and I came into contact through Kenner because Kenner was sending me stuff. I think there's a few things that I still have that he sent me. I think what did he send me? I'm trying to remember. There was a few. I mean, God, I can't think. Oh, I think he sent me Drive, the Marshall, or maybe somebody else sent me that. I can't remember. But he was, you get these packages that would be like, it was I think it was like Chris. I think Kareem was his real name. But Kenner was like the name he was using. I can't remember, but you get these big packages from Minnesota that would just have all these tapes of them. It was I haven't spoken with him in a while. I got to reach out to him.
Yeah, I haven't heard from him either. I hope he's doing well. Yeah, it was always fun getting those packages. Like he would send me, like I guess I think he sent me the whole run of the Blood Fist movies at some point. Um, but it was always fun. And his site, Movies in the Attic, was really good too. And then he stopped, uh, doing reviews and stuff, which was a shame because I always like hearing his take on stuff, especially when we had differences of opinions, kind of finding the middle ground and stuff. So
Yeah, because I think he had a website before either of us, and then the website, whoever was hosting it, it went down. So he was trying to move his old reviews over to Blogger, and I think he just he kind of gave up after a bit. Like he just didn't have the time for it.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny. Like there were so many sites back in the day that just aren't kicking around anymore. But guys like us, we keep at it, and one of these days, like I said, one of us will wind up on a commentary track or something. I mean, actually, I just did get my first pull quote on a movie like this month, so that was a big thing on the Severance Emmanuel box set. I
Oh,
got a quote on I Emmanuel, so that was big. So I've been doing this for like 20 years basically, and I finally got my first quote. So that was huge. So
yeah. Well, yeah, those are that was how I got my first quotes. Were a couple of Severance. I think it was Strike Commando 2 was one, and was it Double Target or something like that? It was a Miles O'Keefe movie that was it was an Italian movie. But the first one I ever got was because I got those Severed movies, but then I got one before it was the Minion, the Dolph Lundgren movie. My
oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, my opening line for the because my first two paragraphs is like the opening and then the synopsis and then the third paragraph is what I thought of it, and I said this is too amazing for words, but I meant it tongue in cheek because it's just such a ridiculous movie. But they put that quote. It was like a movie. It was like a 3-movie set, a 3-movie DVD, and I think they were just the other 2 movies were big screen releases. I think I can't remember what they were, but they were big screen releases. So it was like when they put the Minion on, they were just like struggling to find something. And they didn't even put direct to video connoisseur. They put mattmovieguy.com. So anybody who sees that, you're going to see the old link, which doesn't go anywhere. But it was kind of the funniest thing. It was like, man, I'll take it, because it was like, it's like it's on a CD, a DVD. Like somebody who read the site sent me a picture of it. Like, Mac, did you know this was and I was like, oh, I had no idea. This is crazy. So yeah, I had the case around here somewhere. Oh yeah, I think I see it right here. So it was Deep Rising and the Puppet Masters. And so
Wow,
I guess
that's a triple feature.
right, exactly. And so I guess with the first 2, they had no trouble finding, like legitimate sources. I guess I could consider myself a legitimate source now, but back then I was just some kid writing, blog posts and stuff. And so, but they were like, "Hey, we need something here. Okay, we'll take it."
Yeah, I mean, it was a thrill, and it's cool, and because I was joking with my friends, and I sent them the picture, and I was like, yeah, all the those years of watching smuts finally paid off.
Yeah, well, that's a good point because I saw that they were releasing the Emmanuel. So I think that's awesome that they quoted one of yours. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, and I was thrilled. It was like the only non Sylvia Christel one in the set, so that made it even better because it's like 'cause I pride myself in watching like all the off-brand Emmanuel and any kind of rip off sequel to the rip off or whatever. That's kind of like my bread and butter anyway. So if it had been for like the original, it would have been cool, but like the fact that it's like, the second tier one. Yeah, now if it was Black Emmanuel, I would have been over the moon. But I mean, I'm still over the moon. But yeah,
Yeah.
it was cool.
No, that's fantastic. Congratulations. Yeah. I mean, did you know that we're both quoted in this big Sam Furstenberg book called Stories from the Trenches?
Oh wow, no.
Yes, so I think you've got a bunch in that one. I mean, the book is massive. So the guy who wrote it, Marcos Seidelman, he sent me a copy of it to review on my site. So I have like a book review section that I put it on there. But yeah, I'll have to go through and look and see which of your movies are, which your reviews are quoted. But I want to say there's like 4 or 5 of your movie reviews quoted in throughout that book.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. So I'm trying to think of what Furstenberg movies it would have been that you covered. That I can't think off the top of my head. Because like I know for me, I think it was like I think I had a couple in there, but I want to say there was
Yeah.
like multiple ones that I saw, and I think also he may have gotten them mixed up, like the like Video Vacuum, and then like the ones that you had like Legends of the Video Store. Those ones that you
Oh
had.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I think he may have attributed a couple of them to that instead of Video Vacuum, even though it's technically all Video Vacuum.
Well, that's fine. It's the thought that counts.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, I'll take a look through it. I'll see if I can find some and send you some screenshots of them because
Yeah, that would be cool. I appreciate that.
yeah, it's one of those things I think for people listening, for us, it's like it's always kind of cool when I don't know about you, but it was like I started the site with this idea that I was going to have these kind of snarky movie reviews for my friends. That was kind of the main idea of it. But then I thought I could make money. I thought like I could people I'd put ads and people would click the ads and stuff like that. And it ended up being that I didn't really make any money from the site, but I met people like yourself who are also doing this too. I met people that made the movies. That was maybe a little less snarky maybe when I was writing the reviews, because I was like, oh, they might actually be reading it. So it ended up being a really cool thing. But you don't expect that your stuff is going to be out there in that way, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, like, when I started it too, like, yeah, I admit I was probably snarkier than I am now, but I've also watched a lot more. I'd say I'd probably watched as many movies in the past 20 years as I have the 20 years prior. So I have a better appreciation for what goes into it. And I have a more of an affinity for actors' bodies of work, especially, my whole thing is quantity over quality. And, people like Eric Roberts or even a Debbie Rochon, where they just have this massive body of work. It's really fun to kind of dive into. And if I had seen something like, say, a Santa Claus back in the day where, I really didn't know too much about Debbie or whatever, it might have been like a 2-star movie or a 2.5, but knowing where it falls into her filmography and knowing, more about her and seeing the film as many times as I had, having a better appreciation, it's more of a 3.5-star movie. So I think context is a lot of it, but it's also, uh, you know, we're both doing this because we love doing it. There would be no other reason. I mean, I've gotten free movies. I've gotten, uh, you know, uh, you know, screeners. I've gotten. I wouldn't say it's paid, paid for itself. But and then with my books, I do well enough with my books uh to do more. I've got, I'm pouring through my last one or my next one now, so hopefully I'm on my last round of you know checking for typos and all that stuff, because that I go blind looking at that stuff. But yeah, you do it for the love of it first, and then everything that comes after it is gravy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think, I took that unplanned hiatus, I think, between 2015 and 2019. And I think coming back after that, it's kind of it's taken on a new level where it's like, okay, I know maybe not to do too many reviews because I might get sick of it, or, I kind of know a good sweet spot, but it's like one of those things where I still have that joy of like going through Tubi and just paging through stuff and being like, oh, that would make a good review. Or like, like tonight when we were talking about Santa Claus, beforehand, before doing the episode, looking through different people's IMDb bios and being like, oh, that person did that movie. Oh, that could be an interesting one to watch. Or that's it still has that fun to it. And so I think as long as it has that fun, and of course, again, being able to talk about movies with you and other guests that we have on, or the people who listen and say, oh, I really love that episode. I really love that kind of thing. Yeah, it just all makes it all worth it. It's just so much fun these movies are a lot of fun, and they're fun to talk about as well.
Yeah, and especially like, when you can find one like a Santa Claus or Elves or something that have a little bit more to it than just the standard issue, cut and dry, uh, where they have, whether it's the star, as in this case, Debbie Rochon, if they have a little bit of her personality in the film, or Elves, where the filmmakers put they're just unmistakable stamp on the material. It makes worth going through the dozen or so, kind of programmer, you know, vehicles worth it.
Yeah, I agree too. Yeah, it's whenever you find one like that, and I think the other thing too is like now, like so many things being available. Like PM Entertainment has so much stuff that's available, and it's like when you watch a PM Entertainment movie that like you're gonna get your explosions at a certain pace, your chases, stuff like that. But then I think also now seeing so many movies, like you said, now it's like, oh well, if I see Charles Napier in one of these, I kind of like it even more. Like I appreciate it even more than I probably should. Like I don't know how many people were watching in the 90s saying like, oh look, it's Charles Napier, I gotta sit and watch this movie. Where it's like now it's like, oh it's Charles, I'm gonna sit and watch this movie.
Right. And I mean, for me, like I think of guys like Gary Daniels, where like I may have saw American Street Fighter 2 late at night, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like, what is" like, and just kind of, like, written it off, but then after seeing, 2 or 3 dozen Gary Daniels movies, I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, that fits pretty well into his filmography there," and that's, kind of, uh, you know, one that's it's an unrelated sequel, so that, like, I was like, "How does this fit into the first one?" Yeah, you just it's just kind of, fun where you have more context for a certain star, certain director, and just like you said, like a Charles Napier pops up, that's a bonus. Like, like I know guys like a Emmett Walsh or like I mean they come on and you're just like kind of like silent fist bump because you're gonna get like just one little quirky little bit that you wouldn't get with anybody else.
Yeah, I always joke about was that Roger Ebert had his oh, that's the Walsh Stanton rule, and that was his
Yeah,
rule.
yeah.
Yeah, and apparently the rule was finally broken with Emmett Walsh being. Was it Emmett Walsh was in Wild Wild West? I think that was when Ebert said that's it. It's done now. I don't know. Like I don't know if you watched Red Scorpion with Emmett Walsh, it was like okay,
Well, yeah, I mean, it is that's the movie I was kind of thinking of because it's just like a Dolph Lundgren movie, and all of a sudden he just like walks off with the movie for about 2 minutes and 45 seconds there.
yeah, yeah. It's absolutely amazing. And Critters. I mean,
Hmm.
there's just nothing more beautiful than seeing Emmett Walsh get thrown through a front window onto it. Like, it's like yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, and you're right. Like when you see some of these names come up in these movies, it does. It kind of makes the whole thing like for example, Santa Claus didn't really have anybody quite like that. Where I was trying to think of. I mean, think of like Maniac Cop, where you just get Tom Atkins. He just he just
Here's another one.
yeah. I mean, when you see a Tom Atkins, like, and I've heard, speaking of the convention circuits, I've heard he's a really nice one. Like, people really enjoy talking to him. But yeah, it's like, oh, Tom Atkins is here. Okay, let's see what happens for the next 10 minutes that he's in this scene.
Yeah, and it's especially like guys like William Lustig. They kind of almost write for that actor, and whenever a lot of times I'm thinking of just William Lustig in general. There's like when you get like Isaac Hayes in Uncle Sam or Bo Hopkins in Uncle Sam. Like there's like these really cool guys that in the 90s nobody was really using them like they should have. And he just kind of gives for like half a reel or whatever, they just walk off with the movie. And it was always fun to see how he would kind of pepper his films with kind of like these won't say outcasts of the 70s, but guys that were like really big in the 70s had these meaty roles that were doing it on a smaller scale, like in the 90s.
Yeah, you think like a Bo Hopkins, Bo Svensson. I mean, a lot of those actors that yeah, like you said, they weren't being used well. I mean, Richard Roundtree is one that really, whenever you see him in something, one of these B movies, it makes no sense because it's like, how could you watch Shaft and not think that this guy's like not having like a Richard Gere type career?
Right.
But it's like, well, no, so like unfortunately for him, his loss was ended up being our gain in the B movie world because it's like, hey, there's Richard Roundtree sitting behind a police officer's desk, giving Tracy Lords a hard time, and I think it was A Time to Kill. I think it was the movie called or something. Not Intent to Kill because I think that's one I haven't seen, but or Time to Die maybe is what it was called with Jeff Conaway as well. But anyway, Richard Roundtree's sitting there, elevating the scene. Like you said, like the movie has no business having a scene that good in it, but here's Richard Roundtree just like you said, taking the movie and taking it, walking off with it for a bit.
Yeah, and it's he was like always one of those where uh or even like a David Carradine where like he was always sitting at a desk or on the phone. It was like like they probably had him for 1 or 2 days and they're just kind of there to move the plot along. And like I I forgot who said it, but there was somebody I read a review somewhere where maybe it's Psychotronic where uh, Carradine did more scenes sitting at a desk and answering a phone from like 93 to 97 than anybody. And it's funny, like he was always the detective or the strip club owner or something, you know what I mean? And Sometimes they would even show the other person, like, like they'd have the back and forth, but it would never be in a two shot. So, uh, but you would see that like at the time maybe and kind of chuckle and it'd be a subject of derision. But now like stuff like that, like I said, I just give it a little fist pump because it's just they're working actors and to see them, just grind in and out is just a joy sometimes.
Yeah, oh yeah, especially with with Carradine, like just doing his one scene where he's just sitting in the back of a limo talking on a car phone, and that's his scene, and he's got maybe suspenders and a sport coat on or whatever, and he's talking to somebody, keep barking out orders, and then maybe like 2 scenes later that limo blows up, and that's it for David Carradine in that movie. But it's like you got that one moment of him, and like you said, it's like a real like Tiger Woods, nailing that birdie putt on the 18th fist pump kind of thing.
And it's like, and you can always tell there would be like a scene where he'd be like, give me a drink, or he'd do like some, and you can tell he probably just threw that in there for his own amusement. And they kept it because it's David Carradine, and it's just like, especially like all the erotic thrillers he was in at the time. He would be, God, was it Animal Instincts, or it was
Animal
one of them
Instincts. He
where
was, he was the
yeah,
strip club
yeah,
owner in
it
that one.
like
Yeah.
yeah, he had a little bit more to do in that one, but it like you would just see him in these movies and like the video stores gain it was kind of like the blockbuster movies lost because uh they were able to kind of plug these guys into these roles where otherwise they would have probably just got some regional theater actor or something in there. So it was always cool to see these guys kind of cropping up.
Yeah, I mean, Animal Instincts. You've got him, and you've got Jan Michael Vincent spending most of the movie behind a desk.
Yeah.
I
He
really
was another one that spent or like he's on the stakeout. He's just sitting in the car because he was too drunk to walk.
right, exactly.
That's what I had heard from
Right, right.
no shade whatsoever, but I had read somewhere there was a one movie he had to just be sitting in a car because he could not walk.
No, and these directors would just get these films done. They would just and I think it's maybe kind of circling back to Debbie Rochon, right? Because where she's like a consummate professional, right? She's making the work, she's elevating the movie, by being in it. I'm sure she probably has a ton of stories about co-stars like that who, they just, the director's just kind of holding them up like kind of Bela Lugosi and Ed Wood kind of style, to get through the film. And it is, for us watching it, when you see enough of them too, you can kind of pick those kinds of things out. You're like, okay, I think it was John Cross was on one time. He was saying how William Smith, like, if you have a favorite action star, William Smith probably yelled at them from behind a desk. And it's like, it's like when you're watching the movie, when you see his name on, you're like, okay, when is William Smith going to come into this? And what is he going to be dressed like? Because it's either he's the police chief, or he's like a Russian commandant, or he's a biker. But whatever he is, he's probably going to be sitting behind a desk for most of the movie.
Speaking of which, have you seen Champagne and Bullets?
I've been meaning to. I saw Chris, the brain at Bulletproof. He watched it and reviewed it, and he was like, "You got to." Everybody's been telling me I gotta do it. It's on Tubi right now, so I gotta make it happen.
Yeah, maybe that's the next episode because
Okay.
that is has become an instant classic in our household.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Well, maybe we have that down for next year when your next time on. That's perfect. Well, maybe this is a good time for us to wrap it here, Mitch. Before we do though, wrap anything that you wanted to plug.
Yeah, just my website, the video vacuum at blogspot.com. I been doing reviews lately of a lot of vintage smut movies, which is always fun. My latest book is the Chopsaki Companion, the Kung Fu Movie Guide. Uh, and I'm working right now. I'm knee deep in proofreading the Video Vacuum Strikes Back, which is kind of like a couple of my older books where it's just a kind of like a grab bag, but it's kind of a throwback to when I would do the Legends of the Silver Screen, where I'm taking an actor and I'll review like 7 or 8 movies of their work. Some included are Klaus Kinski, Rowdy Roddy Piper, Then I'm doing a whole run through of the Witchcraft series, which as soon as I started proofreading, another Witchcraft movie was
Of
announced,
course.
and I was like, "Oh my god, am I gonna have to like stop the presses here?" But no, I'm like, no, I'm just gonna go with it. I just put a little asterisk here, that, saying a new one was released. But so that I've been working on that. Hopefully, first quarter of 2026, it'll be out for the mass consumption.
Excellent. I can't wait to check that out. You mentioned Klaus Kinski. He was an inaugural Hall of Famer at the Direct to Video Connoisseur. And I kind of ran out of movies that were like direct to video for him. So I'm definitely curious to see what you got for him on there. I mean, curious to see the whole thing, but definitely the Klaus Kinski in particular, I'm definitely
Well,
interested.
one of those quintessential quantity over quality guys where like, one chapter could have David Schmoller movies with Werner Herzog movies and spaghetti westerns with like almost artsy movies. So it's very just like the discovery part of when you're watching and writing it, just seeing how like that the breadth of his body of work. And he's a very problematic actor, or human being, but as an actor, like I remember, I think the first movie I saw of his was Android on
Oh,
cable back in the day, and you're just like, this guy is on a different planet than most actors. And it's just he's one of those guys that it's just really really has that weird vibe to him, but he can play just about anything.
yeah, no, you're right. His westerns is something I've been meaning to get into. I've seen some of his like some of his coming off of Nosferatu, where he was doing like other Dracula movies. They're kind of a trip too. I mean, and like you said, he's problematic. It's like I think that's another area too where it's like you kind of have to understand this is who Klaus Kinski is, and we're not apologizing for any of that. We're just saying like this is a fascinating individual when it came to the film industry. I mean, and the way Werner Herzog was so fascinated with working with him. I don't know how many directors had that kind of relationship with an actor the way he did with Herzog. I mean, with
Oh, it's
Klaus
definitely
Kinski.
one of a kind. Yeah.
Yeah, so I definitely can't wait to check that out. Now, the link to your newest one, to the Kung Fu Companion, that will be in the podcast description. And again, I always say every time you're on that for the proliferation of kung fu movies, and martial arts movies on streaming like Tubi and YouTube, places like that. Your Kung Fu Companion is a great guide for that. And also your site, Video Vacuum, has a lot of great reviews on those movies. So people should check that out if you're trying to figure out which of those movies to watch, because it does seem like there's a ton of them on there. The guide definitely helps.
Well, I appreciate that. And a lot of times too, I mean, the same goes for any real genre. It's like if you watch one Jimmy Wang Yu movie, like, and you like that, there's plenty of Jimmy Wang Yu movies out there that you'll love. He's a big part of the book, and it's just it's fun now because, like you said, like like back in the day, maybe Prime had a bunch of these movies, but now there's like the Wu Tang Channel and Tubi has a mess of them, and you can just fill up your watch list, and it's like back to the old kung fu theater days. So I mean, it's really kind of amazing what's kind of at your fingertips right now.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, so that's definitely cool. And again, like people should check that one out. The link is in the podcast description, so definitely use that and pick that one up. Hey, it's Christmas season. If you've got someone in your life who loves kung fu movies, also if you have someone in your life who loves horror movies, the Bloody Book of Horror is also there as well. So yeah, definitely check out Mitch's books. But yeah, I guess we're wrapping up here, Mitch. Thank you again for coming on. This was a ton of fun.
Yeah, well, thank you, and Merry Elfmas to you.
Yes, Merry Elfmas to you as well, and Merry Elfmas to everybody who's listening. We'll be back soon. Bye, everyone.